I'm not ready to go yet, okay? I'm not ready. You gotta wait. I got shit to do. I'm in the middle of something, all right? Just hold on.
Watch your mouth or don't come in here.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh.
Oh, yeah, people, come on, we're adults here.
You know what? What is the point?
Yeah, we're adults here. I got a fucking Burger King fucking thing on my head. We're all fucking adults here, guys. People, in my chat, 2 words. What are they? 2 words. Let me see the chat flood. Let me see the chat flood. 2 words. Okay, next caller. Please. Let's get into the meat and potatoes, which translate in American to dick and balls.
I got flip-flops. These are my flip-flops. Yeah, I really like my flip-flops because I can put them on. Because look, watch me put them on. I can put them on all by myself. Watch me put them on. Look, are you watching? Look, these are my flip-flops.
Thanksgiving Day. I remember it clearly. It was Thanksgiving Day. I was inserting myself in somebody else's fucking business as a cash grab, and you know. This channel is harsh reality.
Karen Yak se jodió la sucia vida. Amen.
This is Jonathan Lee Riches. I have cheeseburgers. I'm gonna put cheese on them. I'm gonna make sure that I have my hamburgers because I'm a big boy now and I can make the hamburgers. My mom lets me use the stove now.
And I'm just like, wow, I like receipts, and they brought receipts. Like they had evidence to back up everything they said, and I'm like, okay, well, there's got to be another side to this, right? Like this can't. No, this is too fantastic.
Yeah, because you're not going to just jump to the conclusion that there's a conspiracy amongst cops to cover up a murder. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean cops and just like soccer moms and shit. Like that's what made it even crazier. Like,
yeah, get it, Betty. Yeah,
did you have a close relationship with your mom?
Get it, Betty.
Oh, of course, I still do.
Yeah.
My older sister was kind of sad. She was more of the prissy girl that likes going.
That is the best shit fucking
shopping for dresses with mommy. I was the tomboy that liked playing with the people.
Shout out to Cherry for just being just easily the most faithful and loyal supporter that I've ever had, man. That someone could have that tenacity with loyalty. And I'm really blessed to have someone like Cherry be part of this channel and in my life. So it means a lot. And yes, I named him after Mr. T and Rocky. Say, woman. Say, woman. Say, woman. Said your old man ain't got no heart. Why don't you come down to my apartment tonight and I'll show you a real man. Oh my God, I'm so in love with this little dude. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this one up. I love you guys very, 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 very much. And we will do this again very soon, my friends. Oh, say bye. Say bye. Oh, I love you too. Give me a kiss. Oh, I love you. Bye, guys. Woo! Good evening, people. Oh my goodness, I'm excited about this one. People, I'm not going to keep a man waiting at backstage very long because I mean these intros. I even cut it short. They're pretty long, but I don't like to keep my guests waiting when I have guests on here. Because I don't usually even give them much courtesy of long enough notice. But wait, oh my god.
I think we got a super dad. Super dad. I think we got a super dad. Super dad. Super dad. Super dad. Dad, 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 dad. I think we got a super dad. I think we got a super dad.
Oh my god. Thank you so much, Yellow Truth Seeker. I appreciate you so much. Guys, without any further ado, Mr. Mark Bederow.
How are you?
What's up, Mark?
Not much. I like your intro. I just wanted to keep watching that laughing. I was good stuff.
Yeah, I'm a little sillier than most of the channels you're probably used to being
Yeah,
on.
no, I like it.
Which brings me to the fact that I'm very grateful to you for being here. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Man, so yeah, there's a lot that I really want to pick your brain on a lot. But first off, I would be remiss if we didn't mention Tom's CPU stream right now. I mean, there's a lot of people outside of Michael Morrissey's office right now, or wherever. I don't think it's his office necessarily. I'm not even sure, but it's wherever they're holding this event where they're doing a fundraiser.
Yeah, it's in Quincy. That's the largest city in Norfolk County. I know it well. I had family live there for years. So yeah, it's it's his headquarters, if you will. It's his political headquarters.
Wow. So I mean, the guy. All right, let's just cut through the bullshit here. I mean, does it not? I mean, because I'm just a layman. You're an attorney. You're much more educated than I am. Does it not seem completely and totally bizarre that this guy has the audacity to run for office again?
It doesn't surprise me at all. You see this a lot when you have certain jurisdictions that are controlled by one party, and certainly in a district attorney's type race, you get a lot of guys or women, as the case may be, who become DA for life or as long as they want to be until something terrible happens. So it's actually not that unique to me. The real question is anybody going to run against this guy and use all of these prosecutions, as a basis to try to vote him out? And, you've heard me talk about similarities with Norfolk County, Massachusetts, and Brooklyn, New York, where the DA there was a guy named Charles Hines, and he was DA for life, and he just became corrupt. He just ran unopposed, or if he did run opposed, it wasn't serious opposition, but he would raise money, and it took scandals. It took wrongful convictions and bad cases that ultimately got him tossed out in 2013 and led to some serious reforms in that office. And the question is, they're 2 years away from any real election for DA in Norfolk County, if whether this whole Karen Reed fiasco will lead to anyone stepping up and possibly making him vulnerable, because he'll never be more vulnerable than he is now. But it takes somebody to run against the machine, if the machine will still support him, which if they keep prosecuting the case like they are now, maybe it'll get less and less, because this is obviously a fiasco and it's only going to get worse.
Man, it feels like, I mean, I don't know a lot about politics, but it feels like in this political climate, it would be a good time for someone to run against him, because not just because of the Karen Reed thing, but just generally the way the political climate seems. It seems like there's a lot. The want for change just generally is in the air.
But you wouldn't be running just against him. You'd be running against the machine. You'd have to turn the machine against him. And the only way that's ever going to happen is scandal. And that's what I'm suggesting is, that could be happening now, but you still need somebody to make the party bosses and handlers get nervous and try to move away to someone else. And until that happens, he'll be DA for life as long as he wants to be. He's been there forever. He raises money on every election cycle, even though he runs unopposed. What does he do with that? You can keep some of it in the bank for your own campaigns, but without getting into the finer points of election law and whatnot, you can use it, give it to other candidates and do things, which tends to give you influence. You see members of his own staff and the state police who financially donate to him. So you can see one back scratches the other, and that's how you end up or potentially lead to corruption. And a lot of people think that, clearly with some of the cases that you've been following, that that's happening. So, but we'll see if anybody steps up. I mean, that's a big thing to do, to just say, I want to run for DA and do that. So that's a hell of a challenge for somebody to take. But, the writing is on the wall. It's time, and we'll see.
Right. Yeah. You give me just a little bit, because, there's going to be some people here. I mean, most people are already pretty familiar with you and everything. But if you could just give me a little bit of background on you.
Sure. So, I grew up in Massachusetts. I don't live there now. I live in New York, work in New York. But I grew up in Massachusetts, went to law school in the mid to late 90s, and then worked in the Manhattan DA's office for a number of years, which is, that's a very good, well-respected DA's office. They've had a few bumps in the road.
So you're a prosecutor.
I was.
You were a prosecutor.
Yeah, no, when I wanted to start
in Manhattan, like where Law and Order SVU takes place.
all the Law and Order. Listen, when I was a kid DA, they would film Law and Order in the office or the courthouse down the street. And, there were times, I'm dating myself, but one of the stars on the show back then was Angie Harmon. And, you would see her walking by. Yeah. You would see all these other people. And when you work in an office like that, very high profile cases, it's like Los Angeles, New York and LA are the same way. And I'm laughing because I see the Pulp Fiction poster behind you. That's my favorite movie of all time. And Tarantino is my favorite director. And, when I was in the Manhattan DA's office, you'd see a lot of high profile, whether they were defendants or witnesses. And the biggest fanboying I ever had when I was there was years ago. I mean, you're talking like around 2000, 2001. Quentin Tarantino had been arrested for something. I don't remember what, something stupid, and was in the DA's office next door, literally to the office I was in. And I didn't care what he did or what was going on. I was just,
I could guess, but
it's funny because he walked by and the guy next to me, I believe, also had a Pulp Fiction poster. I can't tell you it's the same one. And he kind of looked in the office and kind of looked at it, smirked, and walked on as if, appreciating his own work. But that's the only fanboying I ever did in the office. They had some big celebrities come in there over the years, as you can imagine.
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, there's a couple of people that I might fanboy over, but for the most part, like, I'm just like, yeah, I mean, I don't care who you are. Yeah. Just because like I'm a bitter asshole and
right.
but no, Tarantino, I would definitely I would resist wanting to sit there and pick his brain and talk to him and ask
well, that's the thing. It's hard to like be professional, as they say. But also I was a kid DA, so I wasn't, I was very, very young in lawyer dog years. So I was more interested in, oh my God, it's Tarantino than anything else. But anyway, yeah. So I worked there for a number of years and went into private practice, worked at a large law firm for about 4 years in white collar criminal defense, same type of stuff deal with now, and then started my own practice in Midtown Manhattan, which I've had for since 2008, I suppose now. And that's what I do. Other than that, and I do some grifting on the side, as they say. Kidding. And that's what I do. Yeah. So I have the prosecutorial experience, but a lot more experience in criminal defense, which I loved. Working at the Manhattan DA's office is the best job any young lawyer would ever have. You're young, you're living in Manhattan, you're working.
Seems like it would be rich in experience.
unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, it's Law and Order. You work there. It's, you're seeing crazy stuff. You also see some very bad stuff. I mean, the DA's office was about, I'd say, maybe 4.5 or 5 blocks away, from the World Trade Center. When all that was happening, that was obviously watching that and experiencing that in real time as opposed to television was certainly something that you'll never forget. But what an experience. So it was very good.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, that was
I
for tough days.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I imagine that would be very rich in experience where anything you do after that is going to just be, for the most part, generally probably a cakewalk in comparison.
I don't know if I call it a cakewalk, but what I can tell you is you can't get better training for being a professional and responsible trial lawyer than starting out in the Manhattan DA's office, where you're going to get trained by the best and brightest prosecutors out there. And under a DA who was renowned for having, a lot of discretion and just a lot of respect and a lot of training good lawyers, because the understanding is, in that office, a lot of people, they're not going to be there for life. You look at the Norfolk DA's office, it's very different. Okay. These are bureaucrats. Okay. Most assistant DAs in Manhattan are not there are some who stay there for life, but you see, the impression you get in what's going on in Norfolk County is that these are government people through and through. And that's a whole different approach than, where we were. But now,
that makes sense because if I'm understanding correctly, I would assume, at least in theory, what you're talking about is when you have, new blood constantly coming in, you have the advantage of someone being fresh and hungry and ready to kick some ass. So you're going to probably produce some better results that way, which in almost any business, that would be the case. Right.
Yeah,
but also at the same time, though, is you have it's the method and the ethics that run everything. But whereas when you have people who stay in office constantly on the same job, then that person becomes more powerful than the method and the ethic, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And also, in all fairness, I mean, the Manhattan DA's office is unique. Maybe the LA County DA's office is probably the only one that's the closest similarity, in the sense that they're going to hire roughly 50 assistant DAs every year. I mean, it's that big. It's just, you need a lot because it's a big city, but they're going to get an applicant pool from all over the US, for those 50 spots, they're going to get how many thousands of applications. It's not a smaller place where it's just like, you live locally, you go to law school locally, so let me just go work at the local shop. There's going to be people from all over the country who are going to say, I want to work at the Law and Order office, or I want to be in the big city with the big stuff and everything. And so that naturally is going to raise the talent pool. I mean, you're going to get to select better people. And as part of that, they always had a 3-year requirement, because they didn't want people just to come in because it's such a good resume thing, that, you commit to at least 3 years. I did about 5.5. So I did well over a commitment, but that's kind of the sweet spot too. If you're not going to be a bureaucrat, it's time to go, if you are going to go around that time period. But, a lot of people come in and out, and there's an alumni network that you couldn't imagine that comes out of that office. I mean, you have how many governors of New York, some of the more famous ones, JFK Jr., obviously. There's a current Supreme Court Justice of the United States would work there, Sotomayor. Some, know who she is. I mean, you could go on and on with the types of people that have worked there, and, where they've gone in life. But that's the best experience any young lawyer with an interest in criminal law will ever get, is to grow up as a lawyer in an office like that, and get that kind of training on how to be a lawyer, how to be a professional, and also how to deal with large crowds, people watching. There's a lot of high profile cases, as you can imagine. So there's a lot of media attention on a lot of things, not everything that they do. And it gets you used to that sort of thing at an early age. Whereas, in some of these other counties, it's not as common. Obviously, again, Norfolk County, it's not going to be that common to get the amount of attention on a case like they have now. I mean, it just happens that the biggest criminal case in the country landed over there, and they don't seem particularly well equipped on how to deal with that.
Right. I mean, yeah, because now we're going to get into the meat here, because that brings me to my point, or brings that into the picture. Is I've watched you and listened to you on numerous channels talk about how you feel about this case, but I don't think I could stress enough that what. All right, let me put it like this: what is the difference to you between this being handled negligently versus being handled corrupt, in a corrupt manner? Like, what's the line for you where you feel like this is beyond negligence, how they're dealing with the Karen Reed prosecution?
So, I have very strong feelings. If I had known when I first dipped my toe in this, how triggering it would be to people just to simply offer an opinion with some degree of expertise and call balls and strikes, because that's, these kinds of cases are what I do for a living. I didn't know it'd be so freaking controversial to say, I think this is a bad prosecution, but here we are. But let me start backwards and then go back to the beginning. To me, where this becomes inexcusable, and again, I don't think the case ever should have been indicted. Never mind trial. I don't think
Right.
an indictment, but people may disagree and whatnot. And, the public isn't always aware of what information is out there, which is fine. Lawyers deal with cases and have access to information that the media or the public don't. But to me, the most shocking thing is shortly before the trial, when a lot of materials were released by the federal government to the parties out of, what we're told is the conscience, if you will, of the U.S. Attorney's Office to say we can't allow this to happen without disclosing this information. That's red flag number one. That doesn't happen. Okay. The U.S. Attorney's Office is generally not in the business of going to the local prosecutor and in essence saying, what the hell are you doing? And if you're going to do this, we're going to have to dump a lot of harmful material, harmful to you, the prosecutor, because it's exculpatory to the defense. So that's a major red flag. And then when you look at the actual materials that they disclose, and again, I'm focusing now on disclosure to the prosecution because that's what we're talking about. When does negligent turn into just sheer irresponsible that could be intentional? So when they disclose these materials, they give them to both sides. They don't give it to just the defense. So the prosecution learns about, the Arca stuff that, you and others and myself have talked about probably ad nauseum. And the district attorney is 1,000% aware that the most scientific experts that you'll ever see in your life, with scientific degrees in various fields of science that you and I generally don't understand, with diplomas that could go on and resumes longer than, both your arms, of every
Right.
every scientific discipline, whether it's physics, engineering, kinetics, whatever. These are the pros of the pros when it comes to accident reconstruction. And you hear about, beyond the degrees, that when the U.S. military needs consulting for this kind of thing, that's who they call. When, the National Hockey League, which has a, epidemic like football with concussions and serious head injuries and those kinds of things, wants to do crash analysis and how do we help change that?
Yeah, they attack the science.
That's who, but that's who they call. So let's
Right.
forget. So as opposed to like Trooper Paul, I don't want to jump ahead, but that's who they call. So these guys are as credentialed as credentialed gets, and they get hired by the FBI with a very specific task. It's just simply, we're going to present to you certain data, and we just want to know, does this appear consistent with a car accident, in the sense that the damage to the car and the damage to the human body, does this make sense in this hypothetical of, backing up 25 miles an hour, da 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 da. And they come out, 3 of them, I believe it was, although 2 of them testified, with an opinion that says no, and not it's possible or it's probably or probably not. Their opinion is, although we don't know literally what happened, it doesn't make scientific sense. And, that's not opinion science. That's not psychiatry. That's not psychology. This is like
Physical physics. It's physics.
This is data-driven science based upon math and scientific law. Okay?
Right.
I'm not a science nerd. I don't understand.
We're talking Newton and Einstein.
Right.
Like,
and you're talking physics formulas and speed of velocity and whatever.
right.
And they very methodically explain why it can't be. Okay. For the most part, I'm paraphrasing, but they say it doesn't make sense because, the damage on the car is only related to that one small area where it should have been more, and the damage to the body should have been bruising and much more, all this other stuff. It's interesting. I don't even think they talked about the makeup of the plastic of the taillight, which nobody seemed to really get into, the fact that it was polycarbonate and strong material. Anyway, they basically say that the data does not support the car backing into and causing the damage to the car and what amounts to inexplicable lack of damage to John O'Keefe, based upon the premise you gave us. Any prosecutor who is presented with that evidence, I should rephrase that, any prosecutor who is being intellectually honest and is operating under a sense of integrity with fairness to the accused, and the ethical rules of prosecution, would sit there and say, well, shit, we have a problem now. We have to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And at that point, they don't even have probable cause, never mind proof beyond a reasonable doubt. It is not more probable than not that the car caused John O'Keefe's injuries. So, but they go forward knowing that. So is that intentionally unethical? In my view, yeah. Now, the worst part, though, is the Arca stuff. You're not analyzing it in a vacuum. It's not like the only evidence, the be all end all. So then you get well, let me back up. If you're the prosecutor and you get this Arca information and you now say to yourself, well, what about all those taillight pieces? Our theory is that she smashed into him and this taillight went flying all over the place, 45 pieces of taillight. And the science nerds, I mean that in a good way, are telling us no. Well, that raises another really disturbing question, which would bother a prosecutor acting with integrity. And it would raise a very common sense question to anyone, I think, with over a first grade education, which would be, well, how the hell did the taillight pieces get there if it didn't come from an impact with John O'Keefe? And I would suggest that anyone with a first grade education would then go to the next level, would be, well, if it didn't get there naturally in the sense of the taillight smashing on impact, then it had to get there what I'll call unnaturally. And how did it get there unnaturally? The answer is obvious if you accept the Arca conclusion: human hands acting unnaturally. And then something else comes from the federal disclosure. Now you get to the Michael Proctor texts, and the DA gets those that come from the feds. And you look at that and you say, well, could this have been unnatural? I don't know. What do these text messages tell us? They tell us that, number one, this guy is, a tough guy cop who likes to brag to his friends and family about, I got a big case and whatever. But most importantly, what does he do? He's telling his buddies, don't worry about the homeowner. He's fine. He's a Boston cop. He's fine. Now, I'm not here to tell you that Brian Albert did or did not do anything. I have no idea. But my point is that flippant response? You're muted. Is that flippant response about don't worry about him? He's a Boston cop. Is that consistent with somebody who has that gene in him to perhaps put evidence unnaturally? Maybe. Well, then it gets worse. And then you realize, well, what does he think?
It's clearly not an investigator who's interested in actually getting the truth, because he blatantly, like deliberately in writing, blew off a potential lead to get to the truth.
That's right.
So
and
he's like, he's a Boston cop, so I don't have to worry about him.
But then you go deeper into the messages. You say, well, is he an honest broker to the defendant in the investigation, which is critical to any cop? Whatever you think about, a defendant, you have to do an investigation with integrity, fairness, and credibility. I mean, I see it every day. I see New York City homicide detectives who go out. Many I know both as detectives or now as private investigators. They arrested some of the worst offenders. Maybe you saw that Netflix New York homicide show. Go watch it. A lot of guys I know are featured in that. They're doing it now with LA. I know it has Alan Jackson in it, similar thing, but the original series from last year was New York. My point is these guys go out and they arrest just the worst of the worst. But what do? They don't act emotionally. They don't plant evidence. They don't text their buddies about how much they hate it. They do a job. They want to get the bad guy, but they want to do it right so that the bad guy gets held accountable. Well, what does this guy do? He starts again, and the DA knows this with the Arca stuff and the question of the taillight pieces. He says things about, Karen Reed, obviously, that are just, not worth repeating, the substance, that are just beyond disgusting. It's cruel. There's something wrong with him. I mean, like in his makeup, his wiring, something's like there's an instability in this man as a police officer. So that's bad.
It makes you wonder, like, because there's a psych eval when you apply to the police academy. How did he pass it? Did he know what they wanted to hear? I
don't know. And then, so that's a problem, obviously. What all the text messages going on between the Alberts and the McCabe's and the deleted calls and Google searches and all that. And so now you say to yourself, well, what does that all mean? And well, the first thing you could say is, well, it doesn't mean that anybody killed anyone inside the house. That's true. Those messages don't prove anything like that. But what they, and the deletions, but what they do establish is that these people were talking in a way that's not normal, that they're covering up something, something weird. They know about something bad has happened. And that's not consistent with their story because they're all sleeping unaware. But if the truthful evidence establishes that they do know something, why are they lying about knowing nothing? And what does that lead you to conclude? That they know something dastardly has happened to John O'Keefe, and why would they lie about that? So you put all this together, you put on all the other stuff. That the testimony from Proctor and his boss is going to be that we recovered these taillight pieces day after day after day. Some of the most ridiculous testimony I've ever heard in a courtroom in 26 years. And I've heard a lot of ridiculous testimony in courtrooms over the years.
I would imagine so, yeah.
So to get back to the answer to your question, to kind of pull it all together 15 minutes later, once all of this material was dumped on the Norfolk DA's office, they knew the defense had access to this material. They knew that there's certainly no proof beyond a reasonable doubt, but ethically, there's no probable cause. It's more likely than not that Karen Reed did not commit the crime, being a car accident. And the rules of professional conduct, which are codified in Massachusetts, like New York and every other state, they're almost identical, specifically say that it is unethical for a prosecutor under Rule 3.8, which is titled Special responsibilities of a prosecutor to bring forth charges when you know or reasonably should know there's no probable cause to do so. And when all this evidence came out before trial, there's no probable cause. Forget reasonable doubt. And the response of the Norfolk DA's office at that point was, let's tee it up. Let's go to trial. Let's get it on.
Right. Yeah.
So
I mean,
that
you
to
look-
me, that's the last moment I think you can just say this is just sheer negligence to say this is potentially something worse.
Because it's a DA's office, you know they know better. Like the whole thing. I mean, I've been a witness in cases that never even went forward because the DA will say, okay, well, we're going to call you as a witness. And then they go, turns out we don't feel like the evidence we have is going to be sufficient in a trial if it comes to that. So we're not even going to move forward with this. You're good.
And that's important because what an ethically responsible prosecutor does in certain times, it happens. They believe in their heart of hearts that a defendant is guilty of the crime. That's not the governing standard. The governing standard is, do I have a good faith belief, number one, is there probable cause? And number two, that if I present it to a jury, that there is a credible argument that there is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There is no such credible argument in this case once the Arca people came out. And again, you don't have to believe Karen Reed's innocent. The standard is whether there's a burden of proof on the prosecution and can they prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, which leads to another very disturbing part of this. Most people would say, I believe, who are analyzing this fairly without all of the, online back and forth nastiness for the sake of being nasty, that the Arca testimony actually demonstrates actual innocence because they're telling you it didn't happen the way they're alleging, which is like she's innocent. You don't have to get that far. The question is, and of course the defense has to prove nothing. Literally, they could take a nap during the trial. She'd still be not guilty because of the Arca testimony. But the bottom line is, if they have to prove her guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, that creates another impossible barrier for a prosecutor to ever win, which is sometimes you hear cases where there are like battles of experts and you say, oh, well, they cancel each other out. Well, this case clearly is not that case. Trooper Paul, Arca. I mean, you're dealing with, but let's put that even aside for a minute. Even if the DA had an actual expert, and with all due respect to Trooper Paul, he's not an expert. I mean, and it was disgraceful that the
terrible
DA
at his job.
And I don't. I mean, I do blame him, and I do blame the state police. But
I don't know if Trooper Paul's dirty. You know what I mean? I don't know, but do I think that he was the right person to try to put the responsibility of proving Karen's guilt on? Is he the guy qualified for that?
No.
Absolutely not.
But that's the fault of the prosecutor. They're the ones who
Right.
call this guy. But the point is, going back to the burden of proof and why they're screwed and why they're never going to win, why this is a hopeless exercise, why they shouldn't have be retrying Karen Reed, and why they never should have indicted Karen Reed, is even if they got an expert that is on the level of Arca, okay? And, maybe there's another firm that's a competitor. Competitor is not the right word, but at least on the same reputation, credential level.
Right.
Even
Same
if you
field,
get-
different company.
There's only one way they could ever win, the DA, at a retrial. And the only way they could win is that if they had that level of expert, which I would have suggested to you, if such expert existed, they would have had them instead of Trooper Paul the first time. So they're not going to go to the witness store and buy an expert for the second trial. But even if they could, you would have to have an expert that doesn't just cancel out the Arca, because if a juror were to say, I don't know, none of this, it's hard for me to determine to trust their expert, or on the other hand, their expert. Well, that's getting in the area of reasonable doubt, because the only way the DA would do this is if their expert literally KO'd the Arca guys and said, they're wrong. Here's why. I can explain this to you with science and logic and break this down in English for a jury as to why their analysis is flawed. Short of that, the DA is never going to prove, never mind whether Karen Reed's guilty of a crime, they're never going to prove the factual underpinning that is necessary for her to be guilty of anything, which is the quintessential fact: was there even an impact between her reversing her car and hitting John O'Keefe with a degree of force that it could have caused him, a serious level of injury? And if they can't prove that, there's nothing else to talk about.
Agreed.
And the sad thing is there's a lot more to talk about on top of that, but it becomes unnecessary.
And it wasn't the other stuff that needs to be talked about wasn't properly investigated in the time that it should have been and it needed to be, which costs John O'Keefe justice ultimately.
The beauty of a retrial for the defense here too is they get a chance, as you know, to kind of, refresh, recalibrate, rethink, scrutinize. And, when you give like top level lawyers the chance to do that and do it again with the benefit of experience and prior transcripts and statements that were developed over the course of the trial, I would expect them. I don't know this. I mean, they'll do it the right way. I mean, whatever way they do it, they're going to win. But I would expect if there is a retrial, which I still don't think there will be for some of the reasons we're talking about now, but if there is, I would expect them to restructure the overall theory, not to say that he wasn't killed in the house or that, because that's all relevant to reasonable doubt. You don't have to maybe argue.
Sure. I think that's what their strategy originally was the attempt to kill two birds with one stone, because they actually did a pretty good job doing so. They built reasonable doubt as they were cross-examining, but also made those people out to be liars and painted the picture that they were, that they're the third party culprit.
What I'm suggesting is, and again, high level lawyers can have a difference of opinion, and the beauty is it's all respectful, and you want to like spit out ideas and run ideas. What I would expect them to do at a retrial, I mean, what I would do, and I think others would do based on what you saw, I mean, there was a hung jury on count 2. I mean, before you get to the whole, she was acquitted on the other counts, there's no dispute that there were 9 jurors who were at least willing to consider the concept of a car accident. Okay. And
Sure.
that she might be guilty. What I'm suggesting that they might want to do is restructure the case, not get rid of he was killed in the house and all that stuff, but come out of the box with the Arca stuff and talk about, before you even get to anything else, she's already not guilty because there's no evidence of a car accident. And that will lead you to, then how did the taillight pieces get there? And that's going to lead you to the corruption angle. That's going to lead you to the Proctor and Buchanan. That's going to lead you to why are Jennifer McCabe and Brian Albert and Brian Higgins butt dialing, deleting, taking pictures, dumping phones, doing all kinds of weird stuff. But you start with the fact that before you even get into all that crap, you already know there's reasonable doubt because there's no proof of a car accident, never mind all the other stuff. That's
right.
what
So you're saying that the approach should be, or at least you would take this approach, which is build a foundation off of the Arca experts to show the jury it's already impossible that Karen Reed could have been hit with this car, and then build off of that.
But they couldn't do that in the first trial because they couldn't even interview the Arca guys. I mean, they called them cold. They had their report.
Right.
They had no chance.
They didn't even prep them.
But my point is, they couldn't do it the way I'm suggesting the first time, because how do they know how it's going to even play out, really? I mean, they have some idea based on the report, but you just don't know. And, don't forget also, they learned about Arca very late in the game, right? They learned about it in February or March, I think, for a trial that began in mid-April. Now they have all of this time, right? They're going to get into all this, and they're going to be allowed to speak to the Arca guys. They can think this through. So they have that advantage. They have also the advantage of all the nonsense another thing they didn't have at the first trial, that whole Sally Port fiasco, the video,
Yeah.
they learned about that in real time.
They
got
did.
sandbagged. Okay,
I was there for that.
Let's call it what it is. They got sandbagged by the DA with that spectacle. That video was disclosed to the defense in the middle of trial. Now, I don't understand how how that wasn't a bigger scandal in terms of why are we not potentially discussing a mistrial for them to disclose critical evidence like that in the middle of a trial after our witnesses have already testified. We opened, and only on cross-examination does it even come out, because we're smarter than they are, that this is a, Fugazi video, and they got the witness to put himself a lot of damage in a retrial for him too. They're gonna solve that issue before the next trial. They're gonna know, why did they get it so late? Where was it? What's going on with this video? You have Buchanan, who's kind of screwed by his testimony in the first trial about the video. You have, if there's a retrial, Proctor is going to be terminated by then. You have two other key state police witnesses who are in serious trouble for something. We don't really know how that's going to play out. But all of this is not new information to the DA before trial. So now 30 minutes after the question, at what point did they know? I think you have to go looking at the evidence in a light most favorable to the DA, giving them the benefit of the doubt that they may have just been negligent, and prosecutors sometimes bring bad cases. Sometimes they try people and they lose. It doesn't mean they're corrupt, right? It doesn't mean it happens. But I think looking at all of this in a light most favorable to them, the line in the sand, if you will, the red line for me is, as soon as they saw what the federal government did and said, we're giving this to the defense because we can't in good conscience allow this to happen. And that a lot of these witnesses are mixed up in a federal investigation. That there are allegations that this state trooper is corrupt. What he said. That he arguably planted evidence, or at least there's a good faith basis for the defense to believe it. That he was offered a gift, that he was offered a gift by one of the Alberts, for simply doing his job. And he said, give it to my wife.
And Ryan Nagel slipped on the stand and said that he was questioned by the feds. So
when he said, give it to my wife, that is per se evidence of corruption. That is literally corruption. He is accepting a gift, or at least saying, I will. I mean, he didn't get it at that point, but he's basically saying, I'm okay with you, a witness who has it in for Karen Reed, giving me, an investigator who on his other messages hates her, wishes she was dead, humiliates her, does all these things. Don't worry about the cop. And he says, that's cool. Give it to my wife. Okay.
I mean, the prosecution could probably explain that away and almost convince the jury, if not convince the jury, that was innocent and just negligent. He wasn't thinking, it wasn't him being corrupt or whatever. But when you take that information along with everything else that has come out, and along with the fact that Proctor is now suspended without pay and under internal affairs investigation, well, that just looks like straight up corruption, doesn't it?
It does, and it is. By definition, the text message about the gift is corruption. You also know that he was hotboxing the medical examiner because he wanted a stronger indictment, which is another, from a lawyer standpoint, you say that's a red flag, big one. Never mind calling Karen Reed all these names, pressuring another witness to change a medical, not diagnosis. I mean, the guy was deceased, but to change an opinion on cause and manner of death to help get a murder indictment. That is also treading on an area of corruption. And these people, they knew all this and they went forward. They didn't call them in and say, this is bad. Instead, you had a district attorney go on television and say, Michael Proctor has no relationship with these people, which is not true. Right. But they went forward. A courageous and ethical prosecutor would have been concerned. What these people did instead was call him as a witness. Okay. And then when he testified at trial, again, when you do this for a living and you've seen a lot of things, you looked at the explanation that was offered to explain these terrible text messages. Okay. And you look at his demeanor in apologizing. First of all, he never apologized. Okay.
Yeah, that
what,
was not
what a prosecutor, an experienced prosecutor, or a prosecutor who understands, I want the jury to like me and respect me. You would have told Michael Proctor this: I'm bringing it all out, and you're on your own. When they cross-examine you, I'm going to sit down, and you're going to get clobbered, and you're going to take it like a man, and you own all of this. Okay, I need to be credible. I'm not going to try to help you. Instead, what they do is they put forth this excuse that I was emotional, I was upset. That's what caused me to send these messages. By the way, 8 months later, to 3 different groups of people: his buddies, his colleagues in the state police,
bosses,
his sister. Right. Colleagues.
Right. Yeah.
So my point is, and if that upset him so much, a hit and run death, which is not a good thing, but you're what they call murder police, and you're handling all these other terrible cases, which you now are coming back, you can see, to bite them in the ass.
Oh my God, it's so bad.
The question becomes, you're not, as a prosecutor, you're not troubled by this? No, they're just going to call him, and then they're going to defend him by saying, well, it was his personal phone. They're enabling Proctor. They're not criticizing him.
Right.
Him.
Right. So, I mean, when you have the prosecution, the Norfolk County DA's office, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, who's defending Proctor and his behavior, it comes off as if that's their policy. It comes off as if they have no ethical standards. It comes off as if, you know what I mean? There's no quick way to go, hey, wait a second.
Listen,
this is not what you do.
All you need to know about how they feel about this is look at that Brady letter that came out a week ago. Now, these Brady letters, they're not that uncommon. I've gotten those. I mean, it happens. But look at the substance of that letter, okay? It's very wishy-washy. It's very milquetoast. It's very essentially saying, well, the defense alleged that, he may be this, he may be that. I'm not saying they have to come out and say, this guy's a piece of garbage, he's corrupt, he's dirty, and we're telling you, do what you want. But it's almost apologetic. It almost feels like a hostage letter that they knew ethically and morally they have to disclose his alleged misconduct. But it looks like somebody put a gun to their head to get him to do it. The way it's written. It's again, I'm talking not that they did the letter, they had to do the letter. It's the content in tone of the letter. It's just, it looks like they're holding their nose and just saying, we don't necessarily agree with any of this, but whatever, these scummy defense lawyers say this, so we have to tell you. I'm kidding when I say scummy defense. I'm rolling my eyes.
I know. But that's normally, I mean, that's what the prosecution's supposed to do, more or less. It's just, these are which is what Lally was doing, which is basically trying to make Jackson and Eddie come off like they're game show hosts. No, they're magicians, and
what they're supposed to do is before the trial internally say, we can't call this guy as a witness. He's a disaster, and he's probably going to lie. And even if we believe he did the investigation honestly, like he claimed, he's still going to lie about his claim about why he sent the messages. There's no question. I got emotionally upset and I lost control. He's screwed either way, because number one is,
you can't. I mean, you just admitted in open court that you got emotional about a case that you're working. That's a conflict of interest right there.
Right. But number one, that testimony is probably not true. You investigate homicides. If that didn't upset you, you're not like some, old lady on the street who stumbles upon a dead body that has 27 bullet holes and freaks out because that's horrible for anyone to see. But number two, and this is even worse, suppose that testimony is true. In other words, he was so emotionally upset about this that it caused him to send this letter. Again, a hit and run by a woman who may have backed into him on purpose or not, that bothers you, as opposed to the guy who chopped up his young wife, into 30 pieces and was Googling, how long till a body rots and how long, to cut someone with a chainsaw and all the other nasty things that he did and all these other horrible cases like the doctor that we saw in the news the other day.
I love that because they're going to rely. They're going to go ahead.
Let me just get this out. So Karen Reed backing into John O'Keefe, that upset you and made you tell your sister these terrible things about her and tell your buddies and tell Yuri and all those guys, but not the other cases? What I'm suggesting is this. There's probably, in my view, I don't know this, I'm speculating, so I'm not accusing. I'm using informed, deductive reasoning based upon his own testimony. Does anybody really think that he wasn't looking for nudes for that poor Walsh woman who was murdered? Right. Does anybody think that didn't happen? I think it did. I'm basing that on evidence.
Or to piggyback off of your thought here, if he only got emotional over Karen Reed's case and not these other ones that he's working, why?
That's right.
Why? What about it? Could it be because you have an emotional relationship? You have a personal relationship with the people involved at 34 Fairview?
Now take all of this, take everything else we've talked at and go back to the point, what a responsible prosecutor would do with all of this information. Okay.
Right.
What a responsible prosecutor would do with all of this information and all of this concern, all these red flags about Proctor that we're talking about now, is they would retrace his investigative steps, review his reports, what he claims happened, and look for more red flags and say, do we believe this guy? And in that context, you would say, he thought this was a car accident because John O'Keefe had one shoe on. That doesn't make any sense. He denied that he had tunnel vision. There was no need to look into anything, but he ordered a tow truck before he ever got to the location and observed it. In other words, I'm taking the truck. You know what? That would get me concerned as a prosecutor. Something nefarious is going on here. Okay, fine. Go to the next step. He does go to Dighton, where the car, contrary to what the DA tried to argue about consciousness of guilt, the car was in plain view. I mean, it's in her father and mother's driveway, like ass out, meaning the rear taillight is facing the street. That's a hell of a way to conceal the truck, by the way. I drove to my parents' house, parked it outside in the driveway with the taillight at issue facing the public. But so he gets there. I'm towing the truck. I've been told that, there's this fractured taillight. I've been told that they've already recovered taillight pieces on the scene. And I'm a trained homicide investigator. I believe Karen Reed committed some form of homicide. I believe that the murder weapon, for a lack of a better term, is staring at me in the driveway, right? The car is, in essence, the murder weapon, if you will. There's a taillight there, which should tell you everything. And he doesn't pick up this. That's all. This is a homicide detective. He doesn't pick up this, take a picture, which will have the metadata and prove that could have conclusively proven the condition of the taillight at that critical time. He doesn't do that. You also know, again, this is from the perspective of Lally and his supervisors. You also know that there is a Dighton police officer who was far and away the most honest law enforcement official in the case, for the simple reason, doesn't give a shit. He has no interest. Okay,
I was no skin in the game at all.
And he testifies very nonchalantly, very matter-of-factly. There was a crack, but which, by the way, is consistent with how polycarbonate, instead of shattering, it would go in, puncture, if you will.
Right.
And he described it, I believe, I don't remember the exact words, but it was one, a small crack, certainly nothing that Proctor was saying. So what I'm suggesting is, when the Arca report comes out, when the text messages come out, when all the other stuff that we're talking about comes out, the DA goes back, scrutinizes what they were told by Proctor and Buchanan, And I'm here to tell you that a responsible prosecutor in virtually any other DA's office in this country who's doing this ethically and responsibly would say, I got a problem here. And beyond that, if I'm still obsessed because I think Karen Reed's guilty, notwithstanding all the evidence, which does not suggest that, but how am I doing this with Michael Proctor? How am I calling him as a witness to tell the story that any sane prosecutor would know is not true? And how am I eliciting testimony from him where he sheepishly says, I sent those messages because I was upset? Okay.
Right.
And
It feels like the smart money would have been on just distancing themselves from Proctor from the beginning, finding a strategy to prosecute this and somehow, but how do you distance yourself from the lead investigator?
Well,
I mean, by what? Making them testify almost last?
No,
That's
by making a tough
crazy.
decision to say maybe it's bigger than one corrupt cop, which is this case has no merit. Okay. It's not a
Right.
valid or viable or even ethical prosecution. And there are times where prosecutors, whatever they think personally, have to be guided by a higher principle. They wear the white hat in the criminal justice system.
No, that's what we're in agreement that this should have never even been prosecuted in the first place. I'm saying, let's say they're going to prosecute no matter what, but how can you possibly do that?
I got to tell you,
with a lead investigator like Proctor, and how do you distance yourself and properly prosecute a case by distancing yourself from the lead investigator? It can't be done. I don't see how it can be done.
Everything that we watched in this first trial, to me, and obviously learning more as this is going on, and what have I gotten myself into? I'm tangentially involved in something related now, obviously, but in watching this a few months ago from afar, from a much different culture, even though I know the masshole culture. I laugh at what's going on here. I'm a little different from a lot of these people, but I come from that area. I get it.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Different area of, greater Boston.
I come from South Florida, and there's a very similar.
Right.
That's why they all call me, you're a masshole, Will. And I'm like, okay, I know what they mean.
Right. But so culturally, I get it. But from a lawyer culture who had not practiced in Massachusetts at all, and practices in a jurisdiction that most people would say is probably crazy. Okay. I mean, New York is upside down on so many things, but in watching this whole thing with Proctor, I'm sitting here saying, what is the DA going to do? Okay. Are they really going to call this guy? I mean, if they're bringing the case, I guess they feel they have to, but if they don't, the defense will. And then you may remember this. What I was telling people was, if I'm Proctor and I'm represented by counsel, I'm going to make this easy for you. I'm taking the fifth. I don't care about your case. I'm not going to do something which is going to come back and bite me in the ass and incriminate myself and lessen my options down the line. The feds are, you don't know if it's over or not. Maybe he knows things we don't know. I don't
crazy.
know. But
this whole thing is it's like a surreal dream.
Stunned that Michael Proctor willingly testified and why he thought that was a good idea on many levels. And number one, could have dragged out his disciplinary proceeding and fed his family for probably several more months administratively if he dragged that process out. Whatever, he chose not to. But a lot of people were speculating online. Oh, I heard he made a deal, and I haven't heard that. I don't know that or not know that, but I know this. If you wanted to play ball with the feds, the time to cut the deal was before you perjured yourself in the Karen Reed case, because your value to the feds is much less. Even if they listen to you, you're going to call him as a witness. I mean, imagine him as a witness. I'm making this up, so nobody hold me to this. Imagine calling Michael Proctor as a witness against Brian Albert and Brian Higgins, okay? For something that happened. Well,
his credibility's screwed just because he took the stand and said what he said on in the Karen Reed trial.
Alberts and Brian Higgins's very accomplished lawyers are going to do. They're going to come after Proctor and say, "You lying sack of shit! You testified 3 months ago the exact opposite." Now, that's not going to happen. My point is this guy screwed himself if he wants to cut a deal. He's almost useless to the feds as a testifying witness as opposed to just gathering an intel witness. It's almost like he's an unreliable CI that they'll sometimes use to like what the evidence is, but then they try to find another way because he has no credibility on the witness stand. Now, he may not be cooperating. I don't know that. But the reality is he is so bad. I don't know how, with all the other evidence that we already, went through earlier today, how the DA could say a month out, we're doing this, and here's how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me.
This whole thing is absolutely surreal that this is even happening, and it's going on for this long.
They have no self-awareness. I don't understand their public relations in trying to deal with this. I mean, look, a prosecutor is not supposed to have talk about cases publicly. You had the press conference, that fiasco in the summer of 2023, very unethical statement by Michael Morrissey, which morphed from, complaining about witness tampering to turning into a hostage the integrity of the Alberts and McCabe's and attacking Karen Reed in essence by saying she's guilty and summarizing the case. You saw the report a week ago where Morrissey said, while the jury had the case the case was on trial anyway, told a reporter, probably in an embargoed interview, meaning you got to hold this for now until I say so, that, the jury, they'll find her guilty. They just don't know it yet. Another ridiculous thing. These are things they're not supposed to be doing. And then the only other press operation they have appears to be, using useful idiots in the form of online trolls to push their message.
It seems like that's what they're doing. Absolutely.
I don't know if they're doing it. I know some people have alleged that. What I'm saying is, but that appears to be the defense.
But it feels like it. You know what I mean? Like I have no proof that that's what they're doing either. And it seems I would even defend them in the sense saying it's too stupid. I can't imagine anybody thinking that that's a good idea. That's even helpful. It's too stupid. Everyone who's actually speaking on behalf of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and how they're handling this case, and the McAlberts, anybody who's speaking on their behalf is not credible in the slightest bit. They either sound like idiots or they've been proven and discredited as complete and utter idiots or criminals by Turtle Boy.
Well, they just don't do everything right. I mean, like a perfect example, real quick before you shift gears, is
sure.
There's nothing wrong in some sense of putting out a message that, don't harass witnesses, don't threaten witnesses. I mean, as a general principle, I think most civilized people would say, yeah, okay, fine. But what Morrissey did was he turned that into a press conference to defend the case against Karen Reed and went way too far in everything that he said. And the reality is, at that point in time, last August, all of the Alberts and McCabe's had their own attorneys. By the way, very accomplished attorneys, good lawyers, okay?
Right.
And they were more than equipped, if they so chose, to give a public speech, just by example. Suppose you're representing Colin Albert, okay? Who had a very accomplished lawyer. He's been around. A lot of people don't like him. He doesn't bother me in the least bit. We're lawyers. It's never personal, and he's representing a client. My point is, their position was, this is like a teenage kid, good kid, who's being publicly maligned, accused of terrible things. We can agree or disagree about that, but it makes perfect sense for his lawyer, his advocate, not the DA, to get up there and say, my kid didn't do anything wrong. He's getting harassed. Leave him alone. This is not right. But that's the person who should be given the press conference, not the DA, who turns it into, John O'Keefe never went in the house. The scientific evidence supports his guilt. All of this stuff about Michael Proctor, he doesn't know anyone. I mean, this is all untrue, all of it. And it's prejudicial to, Karen Reed.
I totally agree with you. I've gone over that clip of Michael Morrissey a million times, and it's always entertaining.
Yeah.
But because you're just dumbfounded. You're like, I can't even believe that there's a district attorney doing this. It's insane.
No, it's very, and again, this is not rocket science for prosecutors and lawyers. What they do is this: when you have a press conference at the time of an indictment, okay, and the ethical rules in play here allow a prosecutor to release very specific information at that time. It will tell you the name of the defendant, the charges, the this, the that, but it also says there are certain things you can't get into. And that's what real prosecutors do. That's how they get their message out. They give a press conference at the time of the indictment. They do things like that, or they issue a press release. And then you know what they do at the bottom of the press release? They issue that little disclaimer that you roll your eyes. You know, suspects are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. That's how they defend themselves, by saying, hey, we're not prejudicing the defendant. That's not how the sausage is made in Norfolk County.
Right. Clearly not. And somebody in the chat, and Jules in the chat, is mentioning how in pretrial they claimed that they had video footage of Karen actually hitting John. And my question is, I'm of the opinion anyway that they said this in order for it to be able to go to move on to trial, so that there would be probable cause. They're like, we have proof, we intend to show this proof. And then when they never do, there can't be any repercussions for that. There can't be any reprimand for that.
Here's how I come out on that. So my understanding is this: there was an NBC or CBS, I think NBC, early news article, which in essence stated that the crime was on video, implying, and the inference is clear. There's a video of Karen Reed mowing down John O'Keefe.
Right.
And the public hears that, and there's no question. To say that that's prejudicial, you can't get more prejudicial than a video showing the defendant commit the crime. I mean, that's
sure.
So
that's smoking gun shit right there.
The question is, how does NBC get that information? Do they get it from the DA? I don't know that. Do they get it from the Massachusetts State Police? I don't know that. Do they get it directly from the Alberts? I don't know that. Although the text messages, if you recall, the guy never came in the house, and the TV reports would suggest that it may have originated with them. And then, did they have the state police do it? Did they do it themselves? Did the DA do it? I don't know. But even putting that aside, the problem with the DA is this: they knew that was not accurate. And an ethical prosecutor at a minimum would have said, stop it with that. Okay. We never said that. We don't want to prejudice the defendant's right to a fair trial. But they let it go. Because why? Because it served its purpose. So, you can be at fault in many different ways. You can be the source of the leak, which is terrible. There are many things that you can do. One of the things that you can do that is very bad is, even if you're not responsible for putting the prejudicial and untrue information out there, is knowing it's false and letting it sit out there, letting it marinate, let it become part of the narrative. And at that point, everybody believes, well, she must be guilty because, there's a video of her doing it. And it's inexcusable that they would allow that to happen.
Yeah, to just let that narrative go on and on and on. Now, I want to ask you, you just recently joined Turtle Boy's defense team. And how did that come about, and what made you decide to go ahead and do that? Were you already licensed in Massachusetts? Just if you could, without, talk about whatever you can, because it's obviously an open case, but whatever you feel comfortable talking about. How did this happen? Walk us through that.
As a matter of process, no, I'm not admitted in Massachusetts, but you can get, if you're in good standing, admitted what they call pro hoc vice, an out-of-state attorney. If you're working with a local attorney, a motion is filed. That's how Alan Jackson got admitted to try the case. He's not admitted in Massachusetts, but he got pro hoc'd in. So in terms of that, you have to get permission from the court on motion to basically be allowed to practice out of jurisdiction on, very specific cases. So it's not a license to just, be open for business in Massachusetts. It's not. It's for these particular cases. I mean, as far as, how do you get involved in this and that? I mean, those are things I would never discuss about anyone. I mean, like lawyer client stuff is just the kind of thing that, whether it be interesting, not interesting, clients with popular newsworthy cases or not, that's just those stuff.
I mean, we have the luxury of Turtle Boy being your client, and Turtle Boy doesn't hold back. So we're pretty much privy to everything that he's dealing with for the most part.
I can't speak to that other, look, obviously this is a unique kind of case. Okay.
Sure.
Again, without getting to privilege things, he's a unique kind of client, but
sure.
Lawyer client stuff, no lawyer is ever going to get into that. But as far as, the case itself, it is interesting. Whatever people think of him, and there are strong feelings, both sides, he broke open the Karen Reed case with his investigative journalism. Again,
without a doubt,
some people don't like it. Others hold their nose at it. Others say, that's journalism. Where I come in on this is, whatever you think of him and whether you approve of the method of journalism or not, the idea to be indicted for crimes under a statute that alleges that you are literally threatening witnesses or engaging in conduct that is designed to prevent them from being witnesses when you're news gathering, again, in whatever way you're news gathering and doing things like that, that there is a statute that basically says if you hurt somebody's feelings and they're a witness, that you can be prosecuted. That's troubling to me.
Right.
The other thing that is troubling to me is just the statute on itself. I mean, the First Amendment is, a lot of lawyers are fascinated and very much into, the right to express yourself, whether you agree or disagree with someone. But people ought to be concerned about the greater issue here, which is greater than any one defendant. If you're in Massachusetts, there is a statute on the books that basically says you can be arrested for causing emotional harm to somebody who's a witness or has relevant information in a case if you upset them and they say, I don't know if I'm going to be a witness. Now, so carry that out for a minute. And I'm not talking specifics about Aiden's case because I'm not going to do that.
Sure.
What I'm talking about is, you've seen videos outside the courthouse of people screaming and saying terrible things in Karen Reed's face during her trial.
Sure.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Karen Reed, under the statute, is a potential witness in her own criminal case. Of course she is. She has a right to testify, right?
Right.
She is a person who would be deemed under the statute as someone who may have information relevant to the issues in the trial, obviously. Okay. Is it fair to say that somebody like her could be caused emotional harm by some of the nasty shit they're saying to her? Absolutely.
Especially if she's innocent until proven guilty, she's a victim. Period.
What if that yelling and screaming and videotaping and publishing of that information, whether it be online trolls, whether it be trolls sticking cameras in her face outside the courtroom, what if that impacts her decision to say, I don't want to testify because they may ask me about this? I would suggest to you, under the statute as it presently exists, those people could be arrested and charged with witness intimidation. I'm not saying they should be. What I'm saying is,
why is Turtle Boy and they aren't? That's the question.
There are videos online where you will see people calling her a murderer. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? There are people,
straight defamation, just lies. I
people
mean,
accusing her of having affairs with people involved in the case. All of that to a potential witness in a criminal case who could have been caused emotional harm. The stuff they say about her online. Okay. How about this? Under the Massachusetts statute, I'm just a lawyer with an opinion about, some of the witnesses who testified in a case and said, well, I think this witness may have perjured themselves. They could have subjected themselves to criminal prosecution. this is not believable. The evidence suggests they're corrupt. The evidence suggests that they're lying. Well, what if it causes that person emotional harm? And now they say, I don't want to be a witness anymore. Am I now subject to arrest? Now, I'm not suggesting that's going to happen, but under the Massachusetts statute as it's drafted, yeah. Now,
yeah,
bear in mind,
crazy. I went over
without getting into the case, because I don't want to do that, other than to say
I won't.
There are certain things, though, that are in the public record that I would just offer without comment in the conversation we're having. 2 of the alleged victims in that were subjected to witness intimidation under that statute.
Right.
One of them is a guy by the name of Michael Proctor. You ever heard of him? The other one is a guy named Yuri Buchanan. Now, the allegation is that they were potential witnesses in the case and were intimidated,
right,
or harassed, and caused emotional harm that could have, impeded justice. Now, again, does that seem appropriate under the statute? Now, you'll see this, and if you're in New York City, you'll see this all the time. I'm actually very pro-cop. I just don't like a lot of the police work in this case, obviously. But you walk down the streets of New York City, and God bless 90% of the NYPD officers who just have a tolerance level to listen to some of this shit that gets yelled in their faces, or the stuff that is done to them. And you know what? You have a First Amendment right to be an asshole and yell in their face and to tell them I hate you and call them names and do this. I'm not saying you should. I'm not saying it's appropriate.
But it's not illegal.
But it's not illegal. And Massachusetts is the problem with their statute is, unlike other states generally, when you talk about witness intimidation, they are trying to make it a crime to engage in what you would call a true threat, meaning, can I swear here?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Classic mafia stuff. I'll break your fucking kneecaps if you testify. That's witness intimidation. Okay. When a guy shows up with a baseball bat and says, you're going to get stupid, as opposed to identifying me, that's witness intimidation. Okay. That's conduct or true threats. Conduct would be hitting someone, offering somebody a bag of money clearly would qualify, right?
Sure.
A true threat, again, similar to what we just talked about, says, listen, you don't want me to have to go, drive away with your kid and, drive off.
You don't want me to have to pay your wife a visit at a job, would you?
All of that kind of stuff. Those are the kinds of things that most states focus on. They focus on the conduct of the actor. The problem with Massachusetts is they're focusing on the feelings of the alleged witness or victim. Okay. And when you can define, by the way, in a legal sense, what emotional harm is, in other words, when does it rise to the level of emotional harm that is actionable or not? Let me know, because
how do you put that it's crazy. Like, I mean, when Turtle Boy had just gotten charged, like, I started talking about this case. I heard about it when it first happened. Then someone reminded me of it almost a year later, and was like, nah, she's innocent. And I was like, what do you mean she's innocent? I was like, because I didn't even think about it. When I first heard about it, I was like, okay, woman was dating a cop and she hit the cop in an argument with her car and killed him. I get it. It happens. I didn't, we follow true crime cases. I didn't think anything of it. But then when people started telling me that they thought she was innocent, I was like, all right, I'm going to look into it. Then I decided to just do it live. I was like, if I'm going to look into it, I'm just going to do it and use it as content. And then people, if they're interested in watching, they can watch.
Right.
People kept saying, you need to read Turtle Boy. You need to read Turtle Boy. And I kept getting frustrated because I was just like, listen, I will get into the Turtle Boy stuff, but I have the luxury of looking at documents, court documents. I'm going to make my own opinion based on the information that is unopinionated. They are court documents. I'm going to make my assessment and my opinions based on that. Then I'll get into the Turtle Boy stuff. And then once I did that, I brought Turtle Boy on here. We had a great conversation. And then not even, I think it was like 2 days later, he gets, and not that him being here had anything to do with that. It was just coincidence. It was just the timing. He ends up getting charged. And I was just like, wait a minute, I just fucking talked to this guy. So I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So I ended up doing like 5 live streams going over each of his charges, and because they put video titles and timestamps, everything. So, and I'm like, well, this clearly says one thing, and then it that's not what he said. I'm playing it right here. I mean, they can't expect to present this to a jury and expect it to fly. It makes no sense. And then I read the law. This is to piggyback off of what you were just saying. I read the law, the statute that they applied to charge him. And then I was just like, wait a minute. And I was saying the same thing back then, what you just said, that the statute itself is clearly unconstitutional. I've got the First Amendment right here. It says Congress cannot make laws that establish a religion or prohibit its free practice. For example, blah, blah, blah. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's about religion. Sorry, I had the wrong thing pulled up. But it said you can't make laws that impede on someone's free speech, and that anybody can protest or picket. You cannot make laws that prohibit someone from doing this. It doesn't say you can't arrest somebody. It says you can't even write the law. You can't even make the law. So I'm like, how does that law even exist?
Well, the problem with the Massachusetts statute is that on its face, I would suggest, and there's going to be, again, down the line, this is going to get addressed in this specific case, that it's unconstitutional on its face, which means the statute has to go, like, bar none. Nobody should be prosecuted under a statute that says this. And it doesn't matter whether you like Aiden, hate him, approve of what he does, don't approve of what he does. You can't get prosecuted under a statute that basically says anybody whose feelings are hurt, who just happens to fall.
If the law is in place, can't the prosecution use that as an argument? Bottom line, like, can a prosecutor, in theory, stand in front of a jury during opening statements, if this goes to trial, and go, hey, whether you think it's unconstitutional or not, it doesn't matter. The law is the law, and that man over there broke the law. Can't the prosecutor argue that and probably win?
I won't predict whether they'll win or lose on any of this, but I mean, that happens every day in every case, even way outside the First Amendment. I mean, there are cases where prosecutors recognize it's a little cheesy. I mean, look, there's other issues with this case too, whether it's selective prosecution, which we'll get to in due course. But yeah, if the law's on the books and they argue that you qualify for being held criminally responsible under the law, yeah, that's going to be their argument. But, when you have challenges to again, on its face, the constitutionality of a statute, those are things that don't get decided by a jury. That gets decided by a judge. That's purely a legal issue. So there's all kinds of legal issues that have to be resolved before anything gets to whether this particular person caused this person emotional harm. I mean, the reality is, especially in a case like this, I mean, if we want to keep score about all the people committing witness intimidation surrounding, a murder case in Massachusetts, it happens every day on Twitter with, all of these screaming, angry trolls. It happens all the time. It happens outside the courthouse all the time. Is it arguably happening because lawyers have opinions criticizing witnesses for what they said? Arguably. This is the slippery slope that this law is creating. And
it's so broad.
Well, listen, New York had a similar issue years ago, maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago, with what they called their aggravated harassment statute, which is just, annoying someone. The whole statute got tossed because it was too broad. If somebody acted with the intent to annoy or alarm someone, causing them whatever. And what the New York Court of Appeals said, which is the highest court in New York, we use different names for, New York's the kind of place where Supreme Court, which you would think is the high court, Supreme Court is actually the low
Right.
court because everything is screwed up here too. But the point is that whole statute was thrown out because it was too unclear what it meant. And they had to go back to the legislature, to go back to Albany and say, you got to rewrite this. And they did. And they tweaked the language and, it's been upheld. The Massachusetts statute is just a big pile of mush. It's not defined. Nobody knows what it means, and it's too broad.
It's
Just
so weird.
you just because somebody calls themselves a witness doesn't necessarily allow someone else to lose their First Amendment rights to engage in free speech, engage in journalism, even provocative journalism. And the part that, you can't ignore also is one thing that the law should never be used is as a weapon of retaliation and to silence. And, obviously when you connect what's going on here as to why a certain individual may be being prosecuted and others may not be for, allegations of witness
It
intimidation.
sounds like the law is being weaponized. It sure as hell comes off that way, doesn't it? I mean,
Well, again, don't want to talk about details.
well,
but
I'll just leave it like this. It could be perceived that way depending on who you are.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think obviously if somebody is publicly louder and has also done damage to a prosecution, right? I mean, we're not talking about a criminal case at this point. We're just talking about what happened. A motion was filed in the Karen Reed case with sensational, well-sourced allegations, in April of 23 or whatever it was. And, a very aggressive reporter found it and started running with it and started publishing newsworthy items about it. And next thing you know, this case became pretty much, at least for now, the biggest, if not the biggest criminal case in the country. And with very serious allegations of police misconduct, framing, whether people believe it or not, there's two sides to every story. But would anybody seriously suggest that those are not matters of public interest that ought to be reported? That's why journalism exists. And that's why the First Amendment has to have teeth. And you can't weaponize a very cheesy, poorly worded statute and say, let's round up some people whose feelings were hurt. And that may be the case. Again, you can agree or disagree with various methods of doing things, but somebody's feelings getting hurt should not stifle speech and news gathering such to the point it leads to arrest.
And that's becoming so gray right now that, that used to be just black and white. You can't just, arrest somebody because somebody's feelings got hurt. But now people's feelings, for some reason, matter that much more, and it's leaked over into like politics and how things are done and how, it's leaked over into just whether or not you're even accepted into society or not to some degree. Whether or not you could even hold your job if you're capable of offending people. It's insane. Now that's a whole nother conversation, but I'm saying because of the climate that society is in now, this law is going to have more teeth than it would have back in, say, I don't know, 1990. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's scary. It's scary because to people like you and me with common sense are going, well, that doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, where's the cap on that? Like, where do we draw the line of how offensive is too offensive? You know what I mean? Like, how and who gets to dictate that?
You need to change the law. If you're going to charge people with witness intimidation, you need to focus on two things: conduct as opposed to speech, or speech which can only be interpreted as a true threat. because the First
Right.
Amendment does get in the way. But that's why the First Amendment exists. And by the way, that's why it's number one. Okay. It's literally the First Amendment for a reason. Free speech was deemed that important to the founding fathers that it was numero uno of
Right.
all the Bill of Rights. Okay.
Right.
Numero uno to stopping tyranny and government oppression and all of that. And the founding fathers and others would be turning over in their graves if they thought that somebody who is exposing allegations of serious, credible allegations of corruption by government officials through the journalism process is
And
being
then the very government is going to
is,
prosecute
is
him.
being prosecuted because you might have hurt someone's feelings by causing them emotional harm. Now, and this is very important. That doesn't mean you have to agree with the things that he said or say that's how I would do it. There is a level of, being provocative about how he does things. It does make people uncomfortable, but that's also
But
that
that's also a method to get people to listen and pay attention.
has nothing to do with the
Right.
criminality of it. When you put the First Amendment is supposed to have a lot of weight. It is supposed to be a bulletproof buffer with certain exceptions. Okay. Again, the First Amendment doesn't give you a right to basically go up and put a gun in someone's face and say, if you testify, I'm going to shoot you. Okay. We all agree that's not free speech given what we're talking about, but that's not what we're talking about here. Okay. We're talking about issues of journalism, exposing corruption through means that have allegedly made certain people uncomfortable. And that has, that should someone go to prison for that?
I mean, no.
I'm
I
just
mean,
asking questions.
right? Yeah, sure, of course. And it's, it's just, it seems insane to me that a jury would even, it would get to a point to where a jury would have to decide whether or not this person has a right to do what he has done. That's where I'm at. And I realize that you can't really comment on that as far as what your opinion is on that, but I where I'm at, and going over it as many, as long as I did, because I immediately, as soon as I read that statute, I guess, what was it, chapter 28, 13A, 13B, or something like that?
268 section 13A and 13B of the
Right.
Massachusetts. Yeah.
Right. I read it over and over again, and I'm going, well, wait a second. So a potential witness. It says a potential witness. So that means,
or a family member.
And right, anybody could be a potential witness.
But I think what's particularly disturbing about it is, if you do a survey of other state laws, which I would encourage people to do. I mean, you live in Massachusetts and you're concerned, see how it is in other places. Look at the focus of the Massachusetts statute. It's causing, it's causing emotional harm, or it could be doing this. It's focused on the feelings of the person who happens to be the witness, which I understand that's touchy feely and, people have feelings. I get it. But look at the other state laws. They're not talking about that. They're talking about the conduct of the actor and whether it rises to something that ought to be criminal. It's not focused on the feelings of the witness.
Right. It's focused on, okay, because some people are just unreasonably sensitive, and you have to kind of decide whether or not, that falls under that category. But since you can't really do that, you have to decide, like you just said, is what this person did, could that be considered criminal?
There is a conflict, okay? And on the one hand, you have the First Amendment, which again is a fundamental constitutional right, number one. And on the other hand, you have a person who has a legitimate interest. I mean, people have a legitimate interest to not feel intimidated and, or I'm upset. I mean, we want people to be happy and nice and all that, whatever. But when there is a legal conflict between the First Amendment and news gathering and journalism, and on the other hand, whether somebody allegedly had emotional harm in a civilized society that has the First Amendment, that has to prevail.
It
Period.
has to.
Full
Right.
stop.
Yeah, we're having a serious crisis. Like for lack of a better term, the Americanism is in crisis. If you can't, if somebody's free speech is impeded, and we have to worry about someone's feelings every time we talk, it makes no sense. Like what? That's the end of stand-up comedy right there. It's over. You know what I mean?
Everything about, to go back to what we're talking about, like just watching this case, you know, from the peanut gallery, meaning the Karen Reed case, not the other one. Although with Aiden's case, you say, my God, the First Amendment, it doesn't exist. You know, I saw recently what happened, you know, with the whole Canton 9 thing, which is a similar situation. How those people got arrested is disgraceful. I mean, it's a First Amendment thing.
Oh yeah, I went over that thoroughly.
Then you go back to the Karen Reed thing, okay? And we're sitting here having a serious discussion after all the crazy shit from this case. We're having a serious discussion about whether we should be calling back jurors to make sure she doesn't get tried twice for the same crime after having been acquitted. And all the evidence suggests, from the jurors anyway, that she was. And we're having a serious discussion about, well, too bad for her. Let her convince another 12 jurors. During the trial, you know, we heard evidence that, you know, Proctor orders up a tow truck. He hasn't even seen it. There's no probable cause. They go down there and you say, and I think him and Buchanan both said it, we have to take the car. We're taking your phone. So now we're implicating the Fourth Amendment, which apparently is optional around here. And, you know, this is suburban Boston in 2024. And it feels almost like, you know, a third world country or the Soviet Union in what we're doing.
Right. It's really crazy that, I mean, because I live in Tennessee, and I could tell you right now that
this shit wouldn't fly there.
No way, not even for a second. Like we love our First Amendment. Like the kind of flags that I see hanging from my neighbors' houses are like colonial flags.
Listen,
you know, the ones with the circle stars, not
Tennessee,
you know what I mean?
You know, I know a lot of guys, you know, because I had a lot of wrongful conviction cases. Okay. And one of the worst wrongful convictions I ever saw occurred in Tennessee for a guy who was released a few years ago. And he was actually innocent, and he went to trial and he got convicted. And they had to have these post-trial hearings and whatnot. And the judge in that case threw it all out, did the right thing. And he was acting on conscience and law. And it was just like, that's what a judge should do, obviously. And this young man was fully exonerated. He's made millions of dollars, of course, and is living his life, has a family now and kids. But they did a miscarriage of justice to him, but they fixed it. It's not perfect.
Right.
But what's going on here, you know, in Massachusetts, which is supposed to be a very sophisticated, educated, hoity-toity, snobby.
I mean, and the American history in Boston alone, you know, you would think that it would be, it's bizarre to watch. Like I said, from Tennessee, watching this, and I mean, this is basically like Trump country, right? I mean, for the most part, it is. But you know, I walk to the gym. It's about a 2-mile walk, 4 miles round trip, and I see Trump banners in front of people's houses. I see Biden, well, not anymore, but Harris. I see RFK Jr. Nobody's like going into people's yards and tearing them up and throwing them. No, you know, nobody's arguing in the street because there's a common understanding here generally. It's an American patriotism that generally takes place here, that it's like, I may not like your choice and I may not agree with you, but I love the fact that I live in a country where you get to have the freedom to have that choice, you know? So it's just, you do your best to promote your candidate and I'll do my best to promote mine. You know what I mean? And that's a beautiful thing. And that's what our forefathers had in mind. That is the essence of democracy.
Of course.
So, but you go and you live in an environment like I live in, and then I look at, you know, Massachusetts right now, and I'm sitting here going, how? Like, that's my interest in this mostly, is I'm constantly fascinated by each thing that happens next, because I'm like, how does this fly? And how is it continuing to go and go and go? It makes no sense.
I don't know. And, you know, this case is on a national spotlight, obviously, whether it's TV, online media, other things. And as I've said for months, it is a horrible look for Massachusetts to be on display for a national criminal justice experiment, to see how this case was tried, the people responsible for bringing the prosecution, whether they be prosecutors or police officers, the physical plant of the courtroom, which was, I thought, embarrassing for a trial of this magnitude, although I understand they couldn't do it in the courtroom that was big enough because you can't see the jury box, that's not a good answer. Like, you need something.
Right.
If the only option is to choose the smaller courtroom, which is the right option because you want them to see the jurors, particularly when you see their demeanor, that does help the defense, but they shouldn't be asked to pick either a courtroom where you can't see the jury or a courtroom that's smaller than your bedroom closet, that, you know, where you can't hear people talk if you have the air conditioning on in the middle of summer. I mean, this is embarrassing on so many different levels. And you're right, Massachusetts is supposed to be, you know, the educated, upper class, intelligent, sophisticated people, and this whole
Well,
process.
and it's also supposed to be more or less an example of real Americana, man.
Yeah.
You know, like this is where John Adams, like, really, like led by example by defending those British soldiers in the Boston Massacre. You
Yep.
know, like he was ostracized like crazy for that.
Yep.
You know, but he was like, this is America. This is the country I want to live in, where they get just as fair a shake as anybody else here. So we're no better than them if we don't give them a fair trial, you know, and I don't give them the best possible defense that they could get, you know. So I mean, but now, I mean, what in the hell is going on?
We are having serious discussions about whether there is any harm or concern about legal precedent, about whether jurors who have repeatedly stated, we acquitted a woman of murder, the most serious charge in the law, and every juror we've heard from, whether it be to the prosecution, to the defense, to the media, has said, that's what we did. You know, did we publish it? No, but what is the harm in getting an explanation? Well, what happened? What happened here? But the DA's position on a national scale in a case like this is they didn't check the box.
They didn't check the box. Like,
There's nothing
really, a technicality?
I don't even want to know why. Now, again, I think a responsible.
If you were interested in justice, you would say, all right, let's get together and let's figure out a way. Let's figure out and get to the bottom of.
Right.
We don't have to ask them what happened in the deliberation room. We just have to know. We just have to know if this woman was actually acquitted, and they didn't get to express this to Beverly Koni.
The irony is this, you know, this defense was really good at using themes, okay, which is, you know, advanced trial practice because these are advanced lawyers. So, for example, you know, in the opening statement, what was the first thing they said? Karen Reed was framed. That was the whole theme through the trial. And in the summation, you remember when Alan is talking about, you know, look away, look the other way, right? Well, guess what's happening with this juror issue? The position of the Norfolk County DA's office is look the other way.
It's been since pre-trial.
We know all these jurors are saying that they acquitted her, but we don't even want to know what the explanation is for this about. And it may very well be if they do a hearing and there is an unsatisfactory answer about why the jury didn't publish a verdict, that a judge might say, then you know what? I find there was no verdict of not guilty.
Right.
You know what? If that's the case, so be it. But why not find out in light of what's going on? I mean, the ask here is very simple. Let's get some evidence and make a ruling. And the DA's position is nobody wants an innocent woman to be retried for a crime in which she was acquitted, but that didn't happen here. And the evidence of that is because I say so. That's their argument. You know, they didn't fill out the box, and no case has ever allowed this to happen. But, you know, I said this on another stream, I think it was last night or last week or whatever. The law evolves. There are times where new things happen that require new rulings. And there's this concept in the law called, like, they call it stare decisis, precedent. Precedent, lawyers rely on precedent, and you use older decisions in cases to keep the law in order. But there are times, for whatever reason, that the law is wrong or it needs to be changed. And the most classic example is segregation. I mean, that was the law of the land until, 1954. The law of the land was, separate but equal. And any time from like 1896 to 1954, until Brown versus Board of Education got rid of that, the argument would be, yeah, but that's the law. I mean, that, the law says, and then, but in 1854,
forget about what's right or wrong. The law is the law.
And, obviously we're talking about two different issues, although they're both important: double jeopardy and segregation.
But no, I get the analogy. I get the relation of the analogy.
Segregation was wrong, period. Never mind, it was the law. It was wrong. And the Supreme Court had to have the courage to say, I don't care about precedent that we've never done this. We can't have this. Why can't we address whether jurors acquitted don't have to ask them about the deliberations? They're wrong about that. Deliberations would be, tell us why you acquitted. Well, I didn't believe this guy. No one's asking that. Simple question. Did you acquit? Did you vote not guilty unanimously? Final verdict. Is that what you did? And if the answer is yes, then you go to the next level, which is, why didn't you tell anyone? And the prosecution may very well have a fair argument. I don't know. They should have done this. But let's hear it. Let's hear it. Look the other way. Or as the way I like to call it, it's like the Wizard of Oz. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain. Just forget it. It's not there.
Right. And what about Fanning having this power over the jury that he had, even though he's a witness? Do we know how accurate that is?
No, I don't. I don't know what he did with the jury. What, if anything, he had to do with the jury? No, I don't know, anything about it. So what I can tell you is this, and this is just a neutral observation, because I'm not going to disparage the man because I don't know what he did or didn't do. But what I will tell you is this. He is the supervisor of the Norfolk County DA state police outlet that literally is encamped in the DA's office. His subordinates are guys named Proctor, Buchanan, and Tully.
Right.
So he is completely associated with the prosecution of this case. Having said that, because of his relationships and involvement in the DA's office in the case, he has no business being anywhere near the jurors in a courtroom of this case unless he's doing one thing and one thing only, and that's answering questions under oath on the witness stand. Now, I don't know what he was doing or not doing vis-a-vis the jury, but I can tell you he sure as hell should not have been doing anything with the jury, given his close relation to, and, the fact also that he received, as I understand it, some of those text messages as well that were inappropriate.
Yeah.
So that's troubling too.
Right. Yeah. I'm shocked that, because I find myself playing devil's advocate even when I don't want to, because one place I go where I'm playing devil's advocate is when I'm asked, okay, well, everybody seems to be either related to each other or they know each other. Is that just because Norfolk County is tight knit like that? Is there no other way? Is there no way to actually get, like, let's say, a judge whose brother didn't, defend Chris Albert in a vehicular manslaughter case back in the 90s? Is there a way to get, a lead investigator who isn't buddies and friends with the owners of the house where the crime scene took place. I mean, is there no way? Is it just because it's such a tight-knit place that this happens?
The allegation is that they didn't want another way, which the suggestion by some would be that that's the corruption. Of course, they could have independent people do it, but they didn't want that. That's the argument that's being made, which appears to have some degree of support in the text messages, in the fact that one of the Alberts was a Canton police officer who arranged for the one, EMT to be interviewed, who just happened to say, I heard Karen Reed say I hit him, but no one else did.
Right.
In the fact that Michael Proctor just happens to be the trooper involved who knows everyone and is being offered gifts, where the DA denies that he knew him, that none of the state troopers want to go in the house, that nobody secured a crime scene, even though there was a dead or dying police officer. I mean, you could go on and on. So the question is, the Massachusetts State Police is certainly a big enough agency to have credible, competent investigators come in. And, the biggest sign that something is out of whack here is it's a case involving a dead police officer. And anybody who knows, this is not rocket science either. Anyone who knows how this works knows how law enforcement acts when a brother officer is down. They drop everything. And if he flurries doesn't stop them from making a crime scene. The fact that a guy who owns the house happens to also be a police officer doesn't mean everybody gets stupid and doesn't ask questions and say, I'm not curious to know why the guy.
It would be the opposite, wouldn't it?
It would be the exact.
In theory, don't you think that the fact that it happened to take place in front of a Boston police officer's house, wouldn't there be that much more of pressure to conduct a more thorough investigation?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Wouldn't you think that Boston police officer, or former Boston police officer, would be like, I want to make sure and I cooperate in every way I can? Of
course.
I mean, the guy didn't even come out. He's a trained first responder. He didn't even come out to help. So
here's a test. You go, for those of you that have friends that are police officers not involved in this case, just people you know in life. Forget whatever they think of Karen Reed or don't think of her. Ask them a basic question. Tell them the facts as they were presented to the police on the morning of January 29th, knowing that they all came from the waterfall, knowing they were going to meet at Brian Albert's house, knowing that John O'Keefe was a cop who had planned to go to the house, knowing that Brian Albert and his buddies are in there, pounding White Claws after pounding booze all day, doing all this stuff, and then say, they found John O'Keefe in 18-degree weather without a coat on, one shoe on, okay? Looks like he got the crap kicked out of him. That's just visually. That's not a scientific opinion, just visually. And say, ask the police officers aren't you knocking on the door? Not because you're looking for a killer, but just to say, I don't wait for it. This is going to be the big reveal. Does anybody know what happened to this guy? Did anybody see anything, hear anything? Was he in here? Do you know why he has one shoe? When did he come over? Did you see him get?
I'll do you one better. Why didn't anybody come up and go, I need to go in the house and make sure everyone else is okay, because I've got a dead police officer out here. So I need to go in there and just look around real quick.
Is everyone all right? Yeah.
Nobody did that.
No, and Michael Proctor's testimony was, based on the 2 prior car accidents that I investigated, it struck me that a guy lying in the middle of the front lawn with no coat on and one shoe had all the telltale signs of a hit and run. I mean, are we kidding here?
Unreal. Like, nothing about it says, I mean, it's, and Melanie Little, she pushes this point a lot, is the fact that, and it's a very obvious fact. I mean, he didn't sustain any injuries below the head at all. And you expect us to believe that he was clipped by her taillight on the arm and then went spinning and hit the ground and ended up 10 feet away from
20 feet, right?
And he sustained absolutely no injuries except to his face and the back of his head. Makes no sense.
That's what the crime
scene. And then the scratches from the taillight on his arm, right? I mean, that makes no sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. And look, the other thing is this: some of this isn't evidence per se, but jurors have common sense, and everyone has you like to think is common sense. I mean, I saw earlier tonight, I saw a dog walking around in the background. I've been known to have one of my dogs who's on the couch, pop up and pay a visit. And dogs, assuming they can hear things, always do something. They bark. I mean, anybody walks by outside,
Something.
my dogs are barking. You hear a car or it's screaming, they bark. Somebody comes to the door, they bark. And the idea that that didn't happen here, that it's just a matter of, it doesn't make any sense. And if
the
if
butt
you've ever
dials,
been,
all of that. I mean, none of it adds up.
well, no, the butt dials don't make sense, but we actually, I mean, honestly, this was like kabuki theater. There was testimony in this case where, Brian Albert said, I butt dialed in the act of lovemaking at, 2:22 in the morning. Somehow, I opened up an iPhone, which, as you know, doesn't, I mean, there's, there too. Now here comes the face. I mean, there's like multiple steps. Anyway, so I apparently butt dialed for 20 seconds, which makes no sense. If the other person doesn't answer it, it's going to go to voicemail and just do nothing. And then Brian Higgins did not get the call, but 1 minute later just happened, to butt dial Brian Albert back a message for about 20 seconds in which Brian Albert, I guess, didn't get it because he was in the act of lovemaking. But
not just butt dials, Mark, but answers as well. So there's butt dials and butt answers.
But this is where it gets interesting. I mean, well, first of all, what I'm describing now is not interesting. That's gross. But my point is, and I don't think they did anything was at the trial. This is interesting, though. Given the way Brian Albert was describing the logical explanation for his call, what it means is he was awake, consciously alert. And although one could butt dial without knowing it, although not in the way I think that he's describing, if Brian Higgins had butt dialed him back, his phone would either ring, vibrate, light up, leave a notification noise, and he's awake. He would know, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Now, the other thing, which is interesting, the butt dials that we're talking about and laughing about, and you don't even get into all the deleted stuff, it's 3 minutes before the Google search that they deny happened. I mean, the timeline of this is really dastardly.
Yeah, it's way too coincidental.
Some of the deletions
too coincidental to ignore.
Too, they were texting photographs. I mean, that one could speculate what the hell would that be?
Right.
I don't know, but that's a little more disturbing than just phone messages. Given
I mean, that could have been anything. I mean, look at what they did to my floor. I got to refloor the whole floor. Blah blah blah. That could have been anything.
The other thing that I thought also is really, and in the next trial, I think they're gonna cause more damage on this point. As a lot of these people are trying to poo-poo the text messages and the data and just blow it off as meaning nothing. There was some really interesting gratuitous testimony that came out that I thought warranted more attention. And do you remember when there was testimony very nonchalantly that Jennifer McCabe basically said to Julie Nagel, give me your text messages. I need to see your messages.
Right.
Why?
What? Why? Yeah. Only reinforcing the theory that she's quarterbacking the whole whole cover.
One could make the argument. I don't know literally the answer, but one could make the good faith argument is because she needs to know what's deniable, what's not deniable to kind of like jam the square peg into the round hole for how we're going to explain all of this. And it could help the timeline. It could help with, when are the kids getting picked up and coming and going? I mean, I'm speculating. I don't know the answer to this, but what I do know.
Well, we can only speculate. I mean, I don't pretend to know what happened inside that house.
This
weird. Is what I know. My position is simply this. Karen Reed did not hit John O'Keefe with her vehicle. There's only one other place to look at when you already exclude Karen Reed from that scenario. That is inside 34 Fairview. And the data dictates that he was inside that house as well. So that's where I'm at. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I don't know who did what. All I know is people are lying, and whatever happened to Officer John O'Keefe happened inside that house.
They're lying about something for which there's no reason to lie if they're telling the truth, vis-a-vis we
Right.
saw nothing, we knew nothing, and all went to bed. Then what the hell is everybody creeping around at 2:30 in the morning sending all these messages? And why were they coming up with a story? The guy never came in the house, and freaking out that they're ripping up the Asian lawn next door. You know what I'm talking about, all that. I mean, this is not normal behavior for people that had nothing to do with anything. Doesn't mean they did anything in particular, but it does suggest they know something. And the other thing is this, and retrials, we're talking about all of this, text messages and data. One of the other things I think they'll do in a retrial, there was a video that was put out recently, maybe today or yesterday. I saw it today, that really honed in on the bar.
Oh, are you talking about Microdot's video?
Yeah.
Oh, it's brilliant. I'm going to go over it. Not today, but the next time I go live, I'm going to go over it.
It's the best video that he's ever done, because it's data. It's not opinion. It's just what. Now, I know there's some degree of this could mean this.
There's speculation in there, sure, but it's very well done.
And you watch each event from the perspective of each of these people and really focus in on the body language, approaching, separating, doing this, who's over here, the timing of Higgins's text with this and the pointing. I would expect that you'll see at a retrial, I made a joke about this earlier, that they'll do like a Zapruder frame by frame of this, because that was, I thought, he's right there. I didn't write in the comments.
Yeah.
You're welcome. That was really impressive.
Microdots is an alien. He's from another planet. He's on next level shit.
I would break that down frame by frame, and I would, if you have Higgins at a retrial, I would make him explain every single second his head moves, he points when he's grabbing Brian Albert, and they wrestle on 3 separate occasions.
It's so weird.
I don't remember that in real trial time as it being they engaged, they disengaged, they re-engaged.
I had a hard time because they were showing it on the screen, and I had a hard time making out what was happening, who was who. But watching Microdot's version of it and explaining at least what he was seeing and pointing out, that's Brian Higgins, that's Brian Albert, that's John O'Keefe. Watch John O'Keefe turn his head here. These things were
stepping away,
put it in a whole new perspective.
Waving over and pointing. And I look,
right.
Again, there is some degree of speculation, but knowing everything else that putting this in and knowing in real life, based on the messages and everything else going on, that Higgins is stewing. He's getting ghosted by the woman who's 2 feet away, who won't
She's
look
right
at
there.
him.
Right.
She's right there with her boyfriend, who Higgins testifies, nothing was going on. I didn't really care. But then he sends that text message, "Are you coming?" with multiple question marks. And the multiple question marks, that means something to me. That's emphasis. That's let's go.
Yeah.
So, and then, this man just happens to end up dead less than an hour later. And Higgins, who was inviting John O'Keefe to that house,
first one to leave.
You just stole my thunder. He's out of there in 10 minutes because they don't have whiskey. So I'm going to go park some cars drunk at the police station. I mean, look, this is bad.
Sure. My money has been on, as far as now, again, I stand by what I say, and I mean it, but it could be misconstrued. That's why I'm explaining it thoroughly each time. I don't know what happened inside that house. But if I'm speculating, and I'm speculating responsibly, I'm focused on where the motive would be, and the motive is most strongly on Higgins. At least it appears that way.
Well, it does, based on his own testimony and all this other stuff that we're talking about. And I think one of the things that maybe, again, in hindsight is 2020. I mean, we're sitting here with the possibility of a retrial, but one of the things that perhaps they left on the table with Higgins is explain that text. What the hell is so important to you to get John O'Keefe to come over to that house when you just told us you weren't upset that Karen was ghosting you? You know, you went through that ridiculous testimony about whether she ignored you. I don't know if she got it. I mean, she's sitting right there with her phone.
Yeah.
And so tell us, what was so important for you, if this was a nothing burger, to get him to that house? Explain it. You know,
Right. You've got the relationship, or the communications between Karen Reed and Brian Higgins. Then you've got the Waterfall Bar and Grill. Then you've got the him and Brian Albert butt grabbing, or whatever they call it, grabbing ass or whatever. And then you've got him right after that going, hey, come on. And he's looking, and Brian Albert seems to be trying to chill him out, more or less. Chris Albert seems to be kind of like, oh, I don't know. And then, seems to be,
feels weird. And then you have
all the text messages.
Then you have that wife with the long Greek name. I forget, Kalada.
Right.
And who, by the way, very credible woman. And I think it was her testimony where there was that weird, like, Jennifer McCabe was saying, Karen, you're coming with me, and it's a surprise. Or, like, in other words, are they trying to get her away from the house? I mean, obviously they don't want her to see whatever could be happening if you believe any of this stuff. But certainly when you're operating on reasonable doubt, as opposed to having a responsibility to prove what actually happened, I would think that at a retrial, this plays a much, much bigger role about what was happening in the bar, as well as, I think, the other bar, because I think that the prosecution totally glazed over the idea that, Karen Reed had 9 drinks. I don't know that the video in the other bar supports that.
Right. Apparently there's a receipt or something, but
it's a small amount of money, though. It's not 9 drinks.
Right. Yeah. It's strange to me. I mean, me personally, my opinion, do I believe Karen Reed was intoxicated? Absolutely, without a doubt. She's small, and you look at the behavior in those, the content of those voicemails that she left. She's clearly upset, and she's pissed off, and it sounds like somebody who might have been drinking, but none of that indicates to me someone who wants to murder or just murdered someone. This is someone who's saying whatever she can to manipulate him into coming home, because she is pissed off, because she suspects that he's out there messing around with another girl.
Right.
And it makes sense to me, again, speculating only, but it makes sense to me that they were probably having some alcohol fueled to some degree argument, where the Higgins situation had come up. She says, because it came up in trial that at some point he asked her, John asked her if they had hooked up, and she denied it. She said no. So you have this particular fact, but I'm speculating that they probably had an argument more or less about Higgins, and he says, well, two could play at that game too. There's women there that want me, and blah, 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 and I'm going to go to this party. Oh, fine, go to that party. I don't care. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to hang out. And then she leaves, or there's that thing going on with Higgins, and then he says, you don't understand. A man's got to do what a man's got to do. I'm just going to go over there, see what he wants, and talk to him, or I'm going to fight him, or whatever. Who knows? But the bottom line is, all of the data indicates that Karen Reed just left. There's nobody. Why? How could nobody have seen him laying in the lawn if Karen Reed had hit him with the SUV?
How did nobody hear the impact?
Right. Nobody heard the impact. Nobody heard the tires squealing. Nobody heard anything. Yet, for some reason, Jen McCabe and Matt McCabe, to some degree, basically saw Karen Reed's SUV do literally everything from the time that she arrived to the property to the time that she left, but did not see the alleged crime actually take place. You can account for every movement that her vehicle made, but not.
The police were more interested in interviewing, 50 miles away witnesses who had a month earlier gone to Aruba and had an argument as a possible motive for murder, rather than interview the people that were in the house. Some of them anyway. I mean, they weren't interviewed for several months later. And again, that tells you all you need to know about the integrity of what Proctor was doing. I mean, that just makes no sense. I mean, as an experienced detective, how do you not?
You could pick a scenario out of a hat in regards to this case and find something wrong with it as to it being to some degree exculpatory. It's crazy. This is actually a really great question. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I have my opinion on this, but question for both: speculation as to why Josh Levy has yet to intervene. We've seen one trial other than perjury. Any other ideas?
Well, intervene is not the word I would use. If there is a federal investigation, I
don't think they can intervene.
No, they're not gonna. They can't literally say we object. And I mean, now they could blow it up with indictments, which is a practical sense,
right? But they can't say we're taking this whole case over.
I think people have to also understand how the U.S. attorneys work. Now, I'm not familiar with how the U.S. attorney for the District of Massachusetts works because I've had no experience with them. Interestingly enough, the guy who runs their public corruption unit actually was in the Manhattan DA's office the same time I was. I don't know him very well, but as I said, we come from all kinds of places and go to other places. But federal investigations that involve corruption, allegedly involving law enforcement, the state police, potentially a prosecutor's office, over the course of a number of years and a number of cases, move slowly, methodically, slower than molasses. So they
can I piggyback off of that thought right there real quick? The reason for that is because in literally every other criminal case, the prosecution makes sure that they have enough evidence when they are investigating someone. The goal is to have enough evidence to convince a jury beyond a reasonable doubt that the accused are guilty of this crime, that the jury walks out of there without having any doubt whatsoever. So that means you have to be meticulous and methodical and move slower than molasses to collect all of the evidence to ensure that a jury cannot have any doubt.
That is why, if you look at the statistics of federal conviction rates versus various states, it's much higher for that exact reason. The feds generally don't do it unless they have the goods. But on the other hand, and this is, important to recognize, because they have a higher standard, because they are methodical, because they don't just grab people up in 2 days like Massachusetts State Police, there are many times they don't do anything after an investigation, and that is entirely possible. Could be the result here too. There may not be anyone who gets charged. They may
realize that they don't have enough to prosecute, regardless also, of how long their investigation took place. They may have come up with bupkis.
Right. And they also investigate corruption and things like that. They don't investigate state murder cases. So this is just informed speculation based on common sense and a little bit of experience in this world. Odds are that any investigation of the state police and potentially the DA's office is not entirely Karen Reed centric. It probably would involve
many other cases. It would have to.
Pervasive corruption in which has ensnared all of this stuff with some of the usual suspects. And if that's the case, it have to take much longer as well.
Because I think that most people who are thinking like, well, what's taking them so long are really kind of in the whole Karen Reed, Officer John O'Keefe box. And they're not really thinking in the sense of, okay, no, it's Michael Morrissey's DA's office that's under investigation. And if they were dirty in this case, well, then they were probably dirty in other cases. And it's going to take time, whether they were or not, it's going to take time to find out. So they're going to look at not just this case, and they're going to look meticulously into the Sandra Birchmore case. They're going to look meticulously into the oh my God, was just thinking the guy's name, Brian Walsh case. And that's another thing. Let's segue into that real quick. Because I want to know your thoughts on because I have a question here. How do you think that it's going to go for the prosecution against Brian Walsh to depend on Celebrite data to prosecute him when they just tried to discredit Celebrite data in the Karen Reed trial? Like, how is that even a thing? How could that even be done?
Look, the way they do things there is not normal. It's generally not how prosecutors work. Again, prosecutors, if they're doing their job the right way, are guided by facts and evidence, not emotion and agenda. And Karen Reed clearly was prosecuted out of motive and agenda. And you know that from Michael Proctor's text within, a day of the crime, and other reasons that are, I think, obvious at this point. So
if this trial is still going on while Brian Walsh, if his trial goes on, they're going to use stuff from Brian Walsh. The defense is going to obviously use stuff from Brian Walsh, and the Brian Walsh's defense is going to use stuff from the Karen Reed case.
It's a problem, but they were so focused on getting Karen Reed that they had a fundamental problem they had to deal with, which was the 2:27 a.m. Google search. If the jury believes that Jennifer McCabe sent that message, it's over. That's it. I mean, obviously, there's no explanation for that other than whatever. So they had to go all in on trying to knock that out. Now, what I'd really be concerned about, again, I don't know what the evidence that is at issue in Walsh, but don't be surprised if Walsh's lawyers in some way try to get in front of the stuff that we're talking about. And also, they're going to order the transcripts of all the forensic Celebrite related testimony from this case.
Right. And, why wouldn't they?
Why? Well, I got something better. Why wouldn't they attempt to hire the DA experts in that case? I mean, the experts, they're not going to, if you assume that the two experts who testified for the DA are honest brokers, okay, whether you thought they were credible or not, there's no reason to think that they were corrupt. The tech woman, what was her name? Jessica Hyde.
No. I mean, I think they were trying to promote their independent companies.
Of course. No, but that's my point.
Right.
They're going to testify in a way that does exactly that and remains consistent with what they've said previously. And if that were to somehow help the Brian Walsh people, then they're going to hold their nose and testify for them if called upon to do so, because they're going to be consistent on the data as they see it. Wouldn't that be something?
God, that's what I'm saying is like, the thing is I think Brian Walsh is guilty of sin. Why do I think that?
Believe. Look,
why do I think that? Is because of the Google searches. Right, exactly.
Look, the real question is, I don't know how important Proctor is to that case. For the DA's sake, you better hope not that important. But if he is important, if the phone, I mean, how important are the Google searches? I mean, they're compelling. Obviously, they are as incriminating as.
You know how many trials I've covered where there's some, I mean, at least 3 or 4 trials where I've covered where there was Celebrite data used to help prosecute that helped get guilty convictions.
We deal with Celebrite all the time for the last couple of years, and I have
never. It's a dangerous precedent.
I have never seen a case in my own experience. I'm only speaking from my own experience, in which anyone has literally attempted to argue that the Celebrite records themselves are inaccurate, as opposed to trying to explain why they contain things or what it means or what it doesn't mean.
The prosecution wasted so much time trying to discredit science. I've never seen that before. Like, instead of applying the science to win their case,
they attacked the integrity of Celebrite data, and they attacked the integrity of the Arca investigation, and with a straight face argued that some of what Trooper Paul said was actually what had happened to John O'Keefe, and that's really an indictment of them more than anything else. That's awful.
That's what I'm saying, is like, I just don't see how this is. And guess who's the lead investigator in the Brian Walsh case? Michael Proctor. So, I mean, you've got a serious problem here in the state of Massachusetts. I'm genuinely scared, because I feel like, because of the way that the Commonwealth handled the Karen Reed, John O'Keefe case, Brian Walsh could walk, and who knows who else could
I don't
walk,
know. I mean, I'm not
who are actually guilty. You see what I'm saying?
I don't know. It's a problem, and certainly the DA's position on Celebrite is disturbing. But the instant problem they're going to have is when the lawyers start saying, we need his phone records because we want to know, did he do what he did in the Karen Reed case, about, whether he was demonstrating his bias, whether he did things that are discrediting, whether he lied about it. And it's also another reason to just humiliate him if he testifies. I mean, why would he? I mean, the guy's poison at this point. And so every lawyer on every case, it's not just that, oh, we want more information. They're going to be asking judges to say, we need to see his phones and know, how far does this go? And I mean, I know we talked about this a long time ago now, but why would anybody have any reason to believe that his messages to 3 different groups of people over the course of 8 months, allegedly sent because he was emotionally upset, is a one-off on Karen Reed as opposed to anyone else? I mean, you don't think he's saying things about Brian Walsh like, that sick fuck did this, and I, searched his phone without a warrant? What if it comes into what if they lose evidence based on that? I mean, we don't know, but as a lawyer,
did any even with the most minimal experience as a defense attorney, I would assume, is going to be able to, because of this case, going to be able to destroy the integrity of any investigation that was conducted by Michael Proctor.
Every single lawyer is going to come in and say, Your Honor, my client could have been proctored, and we have a good faith basis to know. And when she says, what do you mean by proctored? Say, what he did with his phone. And no judge in good faith, at a minimum, can deny, what's called an in-camera review of his phone, which means a judge could say, let me look at the phone and I will determine whether there's anything in there that qualifies, and then, turn it over, because we don't want everyone just to look at everyone's phone. But I don't know how any judge, including the one that everybody hates so much, is ultimately going to be able to deny this. And also bear in mind, she did get dinged in this case on not allowing phone. I mean, she got overruled by a higher court saying, no, we're going to let them see some phone records. And that's what led to all that, some of that Jennifer McCabe stuff. So, she may be hesitant to deny it on some of these other cases.
Well, and that leads me to another question, is Judge Beverly Koni, how can she not be held accountable, or at least held responsible, at least even in the court of public opinion? Like, how could she not be held responsible for whatever happens with those other cases? I mean, she could have put a stop to this trial. She could have made sure that this never went to trial in the first place. And now that it has gone to trial, one could, in fairness, blame her for allowing this sham to go on as long as it did. Because if it hadn't gone on, a lot of this stuff would never, the integrity of these other investigations would never be in question. So, I mean, one could put the responsibility on Beverly Koni for allowing this sham to go on as long as it did.
I don't think she was the best judge in the world. I don't go as far as some others to say that, you know, this is literally her fault. She made rulings I thought were bad for the defense. I think she exhibited some frustration with them that was not present with the DA, obviously. I think she did not like Karen Reed. I don't think she liked Alan Jackson. I think she doesn't like David Yannetti. And I don't think she particularly likes Lally, but she tolerates him in a way that is remarkably patient.
She loves the fuck out of Weinberg. I'll tell you that right now. She loves that dude.
That is true. She had great respect for him. But I mean, look, I don't think she tried the best case in the world as a judge. I don't think that makes her corrupt. I mean, a lot of times I get criticized for that.
I'm not saying that I have said that I believe that she's corrupt. Yes, but
some people believe
that's not a factor in what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about right now is one could, I feel like in all fairness, one could put some of the blame as to if, like I said, if Michael Proctor being the lead investigator in so many other open cases and Norfolk County DA's office moving forward with this case and Judge Beverly Koni seems to have pushed it along, I feel like she is in part accountable if this affects justice in all these other cases, because she had the power to put a stop to it, is what I'm saying. Now, bad decision, corruption, I don't know. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the fact that there were motions filed, 3 different motions to dismiss this case, and she denied all 3 of them. Well, she's going to deny the 3rd one, I think, but the other 2 she denied. She had opportunities to, and I'm not a lawyer, but they sure sounded like pretty compelling arguments in those motions to dismiss and disqualify.
Some of it gets tricky. I mean, like, for example, the Arca stuff is clearly exculpatory evidence. It's Brady material. It clearly favors the defense. But at the time, it was in the exclusive possession of the federal government.
What does Brady material mean?
Evidence which tends to favor the defense. If it's in the possession, custody, or control of the prosecution, then they are obligated as a due process type of analysis.
If it could be exculpatory to share it with the defense.
Right. And so the test is if it tends to favor the defense, they've got to turn it over. But of course, in order to do that and you know, to make a violation, suppressing evidence, it has to be in your possession, custody, or control. And if the federal government has it, but they don't share that information with the local prosecutor who doesn't know, you can't blame them for not disclosing for that which they do not possess or have in their custody or control. And I'm making a very legal type argument, but in a legal sense, that is a proper argument. Whereas the defense is going to be arguing this is crazy. I mean, this evidence would have completely exonerated. I mean, if the grand jury knew about Arca, does she get charged? Probably not. But and some of the other arguments that they made about Brady material, I believe the ruling was that it was not in their custody, possession, and control. So it's a little, it gets like in the legal weeds, but you know, the fact that the DA even opted to indict this as a murder case is just.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's on the DA, but I feel like Bev could have put a stop to it, is what I'm saying. Is, I mean, it's obviously all of this stuff that we're seeing, we're going, how does the DA, you know, think that this is ethical to move forward with what they're claiming to have here? But then one could take it further and go, well, why did Judge Beverly Koni not put a stop to this when she could have?
My criticism, I guess, about her, some of the things she did during the trial, where there were times she should have expressed more concern about what was happening in her courtroom in terms of due process and fairness, that I thought she didn't. Like, I remember talking to other people about this in real time on a stream months ago. The day after the inverted video, I remember saying when they were going to come back the next day that what I want to see is the judge, before they bring the jury out the next morning, say, do not bring the jury out. We have some stuff we need to talk about. And have her look at Lally and say, what the hell happened in my courtroom yesterday, in which let's hold off on the inverted part of it. Number one,
Right.
why is this video, which is clearly material and relevant to this case, being disclosed to the defense in the middle of the trial? That's problem number one.
Right.
Now,
How did she let that fly? And like
I don't
Jackson
know what's
almost
going
lost
on.
it.
All I know is what happens, in a New York courtroom with certain judges. They'd be looking at the defense and saying, is there an application for a mistrial that I should be hearing? And you'd be making that, saying, this is outrageous. We opened and strategized this case a particular way. We're getting sandbagged with this evidence. So that's problem number one. How the hell could that happen? Number two, it's false evidence. I mean, you literally offered false evidence.
Right.
Okay. You had a witness almost certainly perjure himself. He identified people and then he backtracked when
does that fall under the category of unethical?
that's
or
true. So I'm asking you, Mr. Prosecutor,
right.
when did you know about this video being inverted? What did you and Buchanan talk about? And why didn't you bring this out on direct or make the defense aware that this is, fugazi evidence, basically? Okay. And number three, see, how could you ask questions of him? I mean, I have this memory of him asking about the video and asking testimony about, can you explain where the driveway is outside the Sally Port? And does it go to the left or the right or whatever? In other words, suggesting that the examiner, meaning Lally, and the witness, meaning Buchanan, were familiar with the video. They were familiar with the layout of the Sally Port. And if they're familiar with the driveway and where it is, how do they not know that the video they're looking at is not accurate? And then most notably,
Well, according to Buchanan, it wasn't inverted. It was backwards. There's a difference. I'm sorry. It wasn't reversed. It was just backwards. It wasn't reversed.
Well, you can, potato, tomato. The bottom line is, and here's the real disturbing part. It's bad enough that the evidence was improper, should not have been admitted, but we're kind of burying the lead about all of this, which is by that video being inverted or backwards or whatever the hell the word we're using is, two very important things happen. Number one, the taillight that everybody cares about is no longer visible. You're looking at the wrong taillight. And wouldn't we all like to see what the taillight looks like? And number two is Proctor, who's creeping around the taillight, is now off site. So you can't see what if anything, he's doing vis-a-vis the taillight. That's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I believe that you could literally take anything that the prosecution claimed was evidence against Karen Read and make it just fill it with doubt easily. I could point out reasons why there's doubt in anything. I'm not even a lawyer, and I feel like I could point out reasons why there's doubt in literally anything that the prosecution presented. And then you have I'll bring up one more thing before we call it. My issue is, as far as the jury goes, based on what I just said here, piggyback off of that, how could 9 people not find any doubt even in whether or not Karen hit John O'Keefe with her SUV? I mean, you can't sit here and say beyond a reasonable doubt, I know 9 people are going to say, I know she hit him. I just don't think that she hit him on purpose. How could 9 people get to that point and say that? It makes no sense to me.
The obvious answer is I have no idea because it's so ridiculous. But then when you kind of peel the onion back and think about it and try to analyze it, here's a trial that lasts 10 weeks. The jurors hear everything once. They don't have readback, not even an option. And you have a prosecutor who's making statements in summation, which is not evidence, by the way.
Right.
And he's saying things about glass being embedded in a shirt and things or whatever it was that sound dastardly. And like, how could that be? And you just wonder if people bought into that. Now, the reality is they still had 3 people they couldn't get, which is actually a lot. I mean, you need 12 out of 12. They're never going to get it any better. But how did 9 people come out on even considering, one of the lower, lesser included offenses, which necessarily means they would have had to at least be open to the concept that there was proof beyond a reasonable doubt that she
hit him. Right.
I don't know. Jurors are not, juries are always, listen, we've talked about this on other streams too. In certain situations, I'm not saying here because I know people don't like this particular judge. I am a major proponent in bench trials under the right circumstances. And if this case was in front of a different judge, I would be a proponent of a bench trial because no judge, by the way, I don't think this judge.
Yeah, no judge is going to not have doubt.
Game over.
Right.
That's it. That's reasonable doubt. You don't have to agree. She's
anybody who even remotely knows the law, much less a judge, there's no way they're not going to have doubt in every single aspect of this case. I totally agree with you.
That those witnesses alone are per se reasonable doubt, and there's always a risk with jurors. And you're in a situation where this case is crazy. I mean, people are screaming at each other online. They're threatening each other. They're mocking each other. Everyone's attacking everyone's physical appearance, and it's horrible. I mean, it's all over the place. I found out today I have a parody account. Who knew?
You're a star now, man. Welcome to the shit show. It's fun.
I'm a moron. I'm a grifter. You too. I'm happy to grift with you anytime you want to.
Yeah, thank
but
you.
The point is, this is like a hot potato, and you start bringing in jurors in a case like this, and you have to be concerned. Are there some people who might have agendas? And here's the reality. If you think it was bad the first time, now every juror who's going to sit on case 2 is watching you, watching others, watching the live streams of the court proceedings, knows that she was acquitted on 2 counts, is hearing all this other stuff, hears all the back and forth about what's going on. How are you picking a jury that is not jurors that do not have an opinion about this case? And when somebody says, I've never heard of this case, do you believe them?
No.
I mean, how do you pick a jury for this case?
No, and I think that there were jurors possibly who, I have no reason to think this other than just I'm assuming, considering when I went to Boston, people recognized me. And so I'm like, okay, there's no way nobody, how could you find 12 people who never heard of this case? It makes no sense. Right. Now I could see people who just kind of heard of it, in passing, but never followed it enough to form an opinion,
months ago,
the idea that there's somebody who's never heard the words Karen Reed and Officer John O'Keefe.
I go to Boston a lot because I'm from there several times a year, go to games, go to visit family, just do stuff. And even right around the time when I went out to go to the trial, it was during the trial. I'm just eating breakfast in a restaurant that we go to semi-frequently. It's not that far from this area that we're talking about. And waitresses arguing at 7 o'clock in the morning about this, and I'm sitting there eating, saying, "This is insane." I
Right.
can't. Now they were going at it respectfully. I mean, they clearly were fond of each other, but they had very strong.
But they were both passionate about their opinions.
Yes, and
they were both emotionally affected by it. Absolutely,
this was literally what everyone was talking about. Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, dude, look at. I mean, hold on. Let me.
I've never seen public nastiness ever in any case more than this ever. I mean, I don't.
I have, but that's why I don't fuck with the missing persons cases anymore. Like it's like there's a whole other corner of YouTube right now. Little Irish Girl knows what I'm talking about. I don't even fuck with that side of YouTube anymore. Because it's insane, and it's especially gross because it's centered around a missing kid. And you're like, what? How can you all act like this? How can his parents act like this? It makes no sense.
But people are so angry. I mean, like, you know, and they seem to have this concept that the way their brains work, which is, you know, we're all upset that John O'Keefe was killed. Of course, that's kind of a unifying thing, not a disagreement. I mean, an innocent, popular guy is dead on the lawn. That's upsetting to everyone. Nobody wants that. Okay. So, but the way these people, or some of them anyway, think is because we want justice for John O'Keefe, that means that the woman who is charged has to be guilty to get him justice. And if you disagree with that, then you're a bad person and you don't believe in justice for John O'Keefe. When some like myself might say, well, justice for John O'Keefe also requires that the right person be prosecuted for killing him. And if proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, we could all agree there's justice but John O'Keefe. But serving up a patsy just to make you feel better isn't justice for anyone. And because I disagree with you is not a reason to think that, you know, you're a con artist, you're a grifter, or you're this.
Right. And the irony is like, at least for me personally, the irony is I'm actually fighting for them. Like the people that we're looking at right here on the screen are the people who I'm most affected by and inspired by, because look at this. This is them protesting Michael Morrissey having a fundraiser. They're like, this guy's more right in really bad weather, and to me that's inspiring. Like I do what I do, and I talk about this case as much as I do because these people are not going to stop fighting for this. They're just not. So the least that I can do and is fight alongside with them as best as I can, at least from here, you know. But you know, at the same time, at the end of the day, what this is about is these people want to live in an environment where they pay taxes and they could count on justice being done. If their auntie gets robbed at gunpoint, they want to make sure that the police and the district attorney's office are going to do their due diligence to make sure that their auntie gets justice. You know, and it's not a lot to ask. It is a simple, basic thing that you should be allowed to take for granted where you live, because you pay the taxes for it. And we have laws in place for this. So the fact that there's this effort, it seems like, at least especially in this case, there's this effort that seems as though they're doing everything to avoid justice. It not only makes these people angry, it makes them scared. And I think I made the point before, like when I was listening to Rita Lombardi speaking, I made the observation. I was like, Rita's not scared so much. Well, she's not as angry as she is scared. But the problem is that she's coming off angry, and she's speaking for everyone there. They come off angry because they are angry because they are sick of being scared. They don't want to be scared. They're tired of feeling scared where they live. You know, So this is what they're fighting for. They don't have anything personal against Michael Morrissey. They simply look at, I live within a system and the system is broken and we want it fixed. And it's our right to have a high standard for justice. It's our right to do that. We should feel safe and we should feel confident and not be afraid to speak up on it where we live. That's anybody. That's anywhere in the United States of America. You should feel that way. And that's why I absolutely support all these people.
Yeah. I mean, these people are afraid to call the local cops. That's crazy.
That's insane. Yeah.
Crazy. That's anarchy.
Man.
I mean, it
is. And it's happening in the United States. And there's this really sad irony along with that, where it's like people are like, well, why aren't the feds intervening? Why aren't the feds jumping in? Why haven't they walked into that courtroom and shut this whole thing down and said, okay, enough with this sham? Well, the reason for that is because we live in a democracy. That the feds don't have that kind of power where they could just roll up in there, and that's a police state that we don't want to live in. You know what I mean? So you welcome that sort of thing. You're opening a can of worms that you may not want to open up. I know I don't. So the irony here is they're operating independently as a state or as a commonwealth, and the feds can't legally just intervene and stop them from doing what they're doing unless there's just sheer corruption, and then they could do that. But it takes time to investigate, and it's a very touchy thing. You have to be sure that this is happening before you start, un-Americanizing a part of America. You know what I mean? You can't just do that. You better be sure, and you better come correct. So I don't think. I'm very patient for those reasons. I'm very patient when it comes to Josh Levy's investigation and what's going to happen from it, whether anything's going to happen from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's really guesswork. I mean, a lot of times, and by the way, when the feds investigate, if nothing comes of it, they don't hold press conferences and say, we looked at Brian Higgins but didn't charge him. They just they comment.
Only when the indictments come is when they hold the press conferences.
But I mean, if there are indictments, they will send out the guys, grab them up, and make a spectacle of it, and that would be the end of the case. But I wouldn't count on that as the exit strategy for the case. What you might count on is the Fed sharing more materials that they no longer feel need to be kept under embargo that they may have, such as, and I'm speculating, this is not informed knowledge, if they have Proctor's phone records and stuff, well, they would know if he sent on other cases, these kinds of things, right? Maybe if that's the case, they might share that. That would discredit him further. Do they know who is in the Sally Port, or do they know what happened to the Sally Port video? Maybe they would share that this time around. Do they have better information about the Google search? I mean, the reality is we think the feds probably support the 2:27 a.m. Google search rather than the 6:30 a.m. If that's the case, is there a way that their expert can shed light on that? Now, that also raises other issues. They don't want to reveal sources and methods as part of their federal law enforcement, so they may be hesitant about that. But there's all these things that they may know that could very well help the defense going forward, even short of indictments or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I this is one of those things where we just are forced to just kind of watch and wait, because we don't really have any control over it other than making sure that the public sees what's going on. That's the limit to my power that I have. That's the limit to Turtle Boy's power that he has. That's the limit to the power you have right now. I got to tell you, when I was just tickled when I found out that you were the newest member of Turtle Boy's defense team, because I'm actually very passionate about that case, because I watched that unfold as it was happening, and when I was fresh to the Karen Reed case, and I was like, when that was happening, I was like, okay, something's seriously wrong here, you know. So to see you, and I know how passionate you are about what you're seeing and how it's affecting you, because we've spoken before on other people's panels, and I've listened to you many times talk about this. And I feel like Timothy Bradel is extremely passionate about what he's doing as well. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what you guys are going to be able to do as a team. And
yeah, it's going to be good. He's very easy to get along with. You know, it's going to be good.
Yeah, he seems like a really nice guy.
Yep.
Like really, really nice, and again, really
very
passionate.
Experienced. Yeah, no, it's going to be good.
Right on, Mark. Thank you so much for joining me, man. I am so grateful to you. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, no, that was fun.
Yeah, right on. Because there's we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours. But and a big shout out to Microdots, man. Next time I go live in Microdots, of course, with your blessing, I'm going to go over your last video because I have a lot of thoughts on it. So I'll probably do that tomorrow. But Mark, thank you for joining me, man.
Okay.
And I'm sure next time you got anything going on coming up soon? Any other channels you're going to appear on that you've got planned?
I don't think so. I may be a little scarce over the next week or so. You know, it's late summer, as they say. So we'll see.
And we can find you on Twitter. Cherry's been dropping your Twitter link, or X, whatever. Yep. She's been dropping that link, so I know we can find you there. And again, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Okay.
All right. Bye, Mark.
Bye.
All right, guys. Mark Bederow, y'all. How about that? All right, guys. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me and joining me. Thank you guys for subscribing. All the new subscribers, thank you so much for liking the video. Please make sure to like it if you haven't already, and if of course you liked it. And if you didn't like it, hit the dislike. It's cool too. Whatever. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for all your support. I really appreciate all you guys so much. I love hanging out with you guys. You guys are the best, and big shout out and much love to all of you guys that were out there protesting in front of this bullshit fundraiser for Michael Morrissey. I'm so glad that you guys had the turnout that you had, and seeing you guys do that with the weather conditions and everything, again, man, just lights a fire right under my ass, man. So I am so grateful to you guys for that. Thank you guys for keeping me inspired all the time. I cannot stress that enough. You guys are amazing. Guys, you are fantastic. I love you guys very much, and we will do this again very soon, my friends.